The subcommittee will come to order. Good morning, and thank you all for being here. I'd like to welcome everyone to our hearing today on building a 21st century infrastructure for America, implementation of the Water Resources Development Act of 2014. Let me try that again. Implementation of the Water Resources Reform and Development Act of 2014 and the Water Resources Development Act of 2016 as encompassed in the WIN Act. The real purpose of this hearing is to look at 21st century infrastructure and what that looks like, what a 21st century infrastructure water resources mission looks like. I think when you look at the mission of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, considering the fact that, that their mission is critical to the maintenance of our navigation channels, the facilitation of literally hundreds of billions of dollars in maritime commerce on an annual basis. The protection and resiliency of our communities, the protection and resiliency and continued ecological productivity of our environment. The mission of the Corps of Engineers is an absolutely critical mission. 3 years ago, the Water Resources Reform and Development Act reformed bureaucracy, and it increased congressional oversight in prioritizing future investment in water resource projects. Then last December, Congress got back on a 2-year cycle for water resources bills with the enactment of the 2016 bill as included in the Water Infrastructure Improvements for the Nation Act. The 2016 bill built on reforms from 2014 to further increase flexibility and remove barriers for state, local, and non-federal interests to invest in infrastructure, and then also helping to strengthen our water infrastructure through activities of the Corps of Engineers to maintain competitiveness, create jobs, and grow the economy. Congress now has 2 transformative WRDA bills in the last 2 Congresses, and both, while I understand are complex, both still have a significant way to go in terms of implementation, which is a concern. For example, in the 3 years since the 2014 bill, about 10% of the provisions don't have implementation guidance. And many of these provisions are pretty critical. There are significant provisions that accelerate project reforms and provisions that provide flexibility through what is largely reviewed as being too rigid of a process. Again, no implementation guidance. Provisions relating to reforms of the Inland Waterways Trust Fund and the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund have not received written implementation guidance. Additionally, many of these reform provisions require issuance of reports on the progress of efficacy of their implementation, and many of these reports have not been sent to the committee. While the 2016 bill was passed just last year, only about 30% of the provisions from that legislation have been implemented. And it really complicated our ability to do a 2016 bill because many of the implementation guidance had not been issued from the 2014 bill, which made it difficult for us to understand what types of tweaks were needed to the law to further improve flexibility, efficiency, and some of the reforms that Congress has been pushing for many years. Additionally, new programs of significant interest from non-federal parties such as the beneficial use of dredge material pilot program have not been fully implemented. We'd hope more of a priority be placed on writing the implementation guidance, particularly for some of these transformative provisions that I think are collectively in the federal and non-federal interest. I'd like to welcome General Semonite and Mr. Lamont, who are testifying before this committee for the first time. I'd also like to recognize General Jackson, who is accompanying General Semonite to complement some of the responses to questions. I look forward to continuing to work with the Corps to ensure the WRDA 2014 and WRDA 2016 provisions are carried out in a fashion that's consistent with congressional intent and that benefits the nation. I just want to, in closing, quickly urge that that many of these provisions in law, the Corps of Engineers is in many cases given regulatory authority and authority to hold citizens accountable in some cases. And I think that it becomes a somewhat difficult scenario when the Corps itself is not following laws, complying with deadlines, yet trying to hold our citizens accountable for laws that are perhaps in the next section of that same act. I'm going to say it again. Your mission is absolutely critical to this nation, and you're a military organization. Generals, if your men and women were out there in the battlefield, and if you were dealing with a situation that simply wasn't working, if the practices, the programs weren't working, and your men and women were vulnerable and perhaps losing life as a result of that, I am certain that you would be making changes in an urgent manner to make sure that you're responding to the conditions on the ground. In some cases, your mission is comparable in terms of the urgency. Lives have been lost in my home state. Lives are going to continue to be lost around the nation because of the inability to complete projects. Now, I'll be clear. I think Congress is culpable in some cases. But the bottom line is the mission is critical, and we need to be working together to finish these projects. So thank you very much. And with that, I now recognize the, look at that guy. You never know who you're going to see in this chair. I now recognize the ranking member, I guess, for today's hearing, Mr. Lowenthal from California, for any remarks he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for holding today's hearing. And I want to welcome all the witnesses that are here today from the Department of the Army and the Corps of Engineers for coming today. You know, over the years, the Corps has distinguished itself for addressing many of the nation's water-related challenges, constructing and maintaining navigation corridors along our coastlines and our inland waterways, to providing critical flood risk reduction, actually, to communities both large and small, to restoring many of our nation's treasured natural resources. The Corps has earned its reputation as the premier water resources agency to the federal government. Yet in recent years, we have seen this role diminished as the federal assistance to the Corps has waned, where once the Corps' ability to help communities was limited only by its creativity in solving complex water resources challenges, today the Corps' presence is significantly limited due to a lack of available resources. Fairly or unfairly, today's Corps is often criticized as being slow and expensive. However, as I pointed out, a significant amount of the blame for these criticisms, while some on the Corps, much of it falls on squarely at the feet of the administration and the Congress for failing to provide you with the resources necessary to help our communities address their local water resources challenges. For example, year after year, presidential budgets for the Corps have been reduced to a point where the Corps cannot efficiently fund critical projects and studies to completion. As a former chief of engineers, Robert Flowers once candidly admitted, when the Corps has not provided efficient and regular funding for Corps studies and projects, projects cost more to complete and take longer for their benefits to be realized. I'm not sure how the President expected Congress to react to his presidential budget requests for the Corps for fiscal year 2018. This was from a presidential candidate that campaigned on the promise of reinvesting in our nation's infrastructure. This fiscal 2018 request fails miserably. At best, it's flat funding for the Corps, but flat funding of an agency that already suffers from delays and uncertainty due to a lack of available resources. For the Corps, less funding means fewer projects are constructed and fewer communities can benefit from the Corps' expertise. For those projects that are constructed, less funding means deferred critical maintenance, and projects must constantly be operated below optimal levels of efficiency. Lack of available funding also means that for many communities, they must pay more or advance their own funding to the Corps in order to move projects forward. And I know that, for example, from my own community that has done that. That is not a sustainable path for addressing our ongoing water resources challenge. We need to do better. First, we need to simply invest more in our domestic infrastructure spending. I suspect if there's not going to be leadership from the President on real federal infrastructure investment, I hope it will be up to the Congress to move forward on real proposals to move this country forward, to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure, and to put Americans back to work. Also, we need to have a realistic conversation on how to address the backlog of unconstructed projects and deferred maintenance of water resources projects facing our nation. This is a ticking time bomb facing our critical infrastructure and our desire to maintain a highly efficient, protective, and resilient water infrastructure for the next century. We also have to ensure that our federal resources agencies are provided necessary funding to meet their statutory obligations in a timely manner. As the ranking member of this committee, Mr. DeFazio has stated, we cannot streamline our way out of our funding shortfall. I applaud your comments, General Semonite, when you recognize that underfunding your partner agencies only slows down your work when permit reviews go unfunded. Lastly, I'd like to express my disappointment with the Trump administration's efforts to undo the Obama administration's Clean Water Protection Rule. These efforts weaken protection of our nation's rivers, streams, and lakes, place at risk the drinking water supply of over 117 million Americans, and reinstate the regulations that caused the confusion surrounding the scope of the Clean Water Act that existed for close to a decade. For years, the regulations for this rulemaking would rush to reinstate were uniformly criticized by farmers, industry, and the construction community as arbitrary, as confusing, and as frustrating. I cannot comprehend how putting these regulations back into effect will remove uncertainty. Action also rejects almost a decade of scientific evidence on the importance of rivers, streams, and lakes to human health and the health of the environment, while jeopardizing the drinking water of 1 in 3 Americans. In short, these actions leave us with less protection, more confusion, and increased costs for all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding today's hearing, and I yield back.
I want to thank the gentleman for his comments, and I want to remind him that I think we share frustration with the inability to get these projects implemented.
Absolutely.
Because the mission's absolutely critical.
Absolutely.
And that's a bipartisan goal. Looking back at the Obama budget, 32% reduction in 2015, FY 2015, 29% reduction in FY 16, 41% reduction in FY 17.
Absolutely.
From the and bipartisan problem. We're committed together with you, Napolitano, and Mr. DeFazio to continue working together to fix this. So
thank you.
Thank you. Before I begin introducing our witnesses this morning, allow me to dispense with some of the unanimous consent requests. I ask unanimous consent that written testimony submitted on behalf of the following be included in the hearing's record from the American Chemistry Council. Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered. I ask unanimous consent that the record remain open 15 days for additional comments and information submitted by members or witnesses be included in the record of today's hearing. Without objection, I ask unanimous consent that the record of today's hearing remain open until such time as our witnesses provide answers to any questions that may be submitted to them in writing. Without objection, it is so ordered. Thank you. Our first witness is Mr. Doug Lamont, senior official performing the duties of the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works. Mr. Lamont, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chairman Graves and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I'm honored to be here today. I'm Doug Lamont, senior official representing the Office of the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works.
Mr. Lamont, would you mind pulling the microphone a little closer?
Make sure it's on.
Okay. Can you hear me now? All right. Thank you again for the invitation to come before you to testify today on the Water Resources Reform and Development Act of 2014 and the Water Resources Development Act of 2016. Through its Civil Works program, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers supports the shipment of goods through our nation's coastal ports and on the inland waterways, helps communities to reduce their flood and coastal storm risks, is restoring several significant aquatic ecosystem restoration endeavors, and provides drinking water, generates renewable electricity, and offers water-based recreation opportunities to the public. For over a century, federal, state, local, and tribal governments have made large investments in our water resources, including the construction of locks and dams and deeper and wider coastal navigation channels to support commercial navigation, and by building levees, reservoirs, and other features to reduce flood risks. In the 21st century, we must continue to look at the best ways to maintain the key features of this infrastructure reliably and safely in a manner that is responsible, economic, and sustainable. The administration recognizes the need to invest in our nation's infrastructure for America, including its water resources infrastructure. The 2018 Civil Works budget supports this effort by providing $5.002 billion in gross discretionary appropriations for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Civil Works program, focusing on investments that will yield high economic and environmental returns or address significant risk to public safety. The budget focuses on our three major mission areas, allocating 42% of the budget to commercial navigation, 27% to flood damage reduction, and 7% to aquatic ecosystem restoration. Other areas of significant funding in the budget include our hydropower program, the cleanup of sites contaminated during the early years of the nation's nuclear weapons program, and our regulatory program. The Army has addressed a significant number of the 206 WRDA 2016 provisions, and we are focused on completing the implementation guidance as quickly as possible. The Water Resources Development Act of 2016 authorized the construction, through your good work, of 30 water resources development projects at a cost of $15.6 billion. Some of the projects authorized include the $743 million West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project, the $1.98 billion Central Everglades project, the Port Everglades project at $337 million, and the $502 million Charleston Harbor project, and the Upper Ohio River Navigation project at $2.69 billion. Implementation guidance for all 30 authorized projects has been completed and published on the Corps website. Implementation guidance for sections 1126 and 1127 has been completed. These provisions address studies and construction efforts that can be completed by non-federal interests. Additionally, implementation guidance for the use of reservoir, sediment, drought contingencies, land conveyance, and tribal consultations and ice jam prevention has been completed. We've completed most of the 2014 implementation guidance and are working to finalize all remaining required guidance as soon as possible. In the year since the last hearing before this subcommittee, we have finalized guidance for emergency communication of risks, levee certifications, use of innovative material, cooperative agreements with tribes, and many other provisions. The Army submitted the 2017 report to Congress on future water resources development in March of this year in response to Section 7001 of WRDA 2014, including an accounting of post-authorization change reports. The process for developing this report includes a Federal Register notice requesting proposals from non-federal interests for proposed feasibility studies and modifications to authorized water resources development projects. A total of 53 proposals were received this year. Of these proposals, 13 met the criteria and are listed in the annual report table. 40 proposals that did not meet the criteria are included in the appendix. The two primary reasons they are in the appendix are that either the proposal did not fit within our identified Corps of Engineers core mission areas, or authority already exists to perform the requested work. Where authority already exists, inclusion in the appendix of 2017 annual report does not preclude at all the Army from carrying out either a study or construction. Mr. Chairman, I look forward to working with you and appreciate the committee's support for the nation's water resources infrastructure. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my oral statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lamont. We're now going to turn to Commanding General, the Chief of Engineers for the United States Army Corps of Engineers, General Semonite. And General, I just want to quickly say I do appreciate the time that we've had to spend together and talk about a different Corps of Engineers, a different project development delivery process moving forward, and looking forward to many more conversations and true change moving forward. General, we recognize for 5 minutes.
Chairman Graves and distinguished members of the committee, I'm Lieutenant General Todd Semonite, Commanding General of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the 54th Chief of Engineers. I'm honored to be here today, accompanied by Mr. Lamont and Major General Ed Jackson, to provide testimony on the recent Water Resources Development Acts, as well as key issues. I've been in command for the Corps for just over a year now, and I continue to be amazed by the breadth and the complexity of the Civil Works program, as well as the expertise and dedication of the professionals that work in our organization. While this is my first time appearing before the committee, I have had the opportunity to work with a number of you individually, and I look forward to continuing to build our relationship during my tenure as Chief of Engineers. It is my belief that the credibility of the Corps is measured in our ability to deliver results that are on time, on budget, and of exceptional quality. To do this and to maintain our status as a world-class organization now and into the future, we're focusing on 3 fundamentals we call strengthen the foundation, deliver the program, and achieve our vision. And I want to give you some highlights of those fundamentals. First, as with any structure, our foundation must be our strength, the bedrock upon which our presence rests and our future is built. For the Corps, this means having the discipline to accomplish routine tasks to a high standard. It means demonstrating that we are reliable and competent partners, assisting in shared efforts to be responsible stewards of the nation's water resources. We are committed to transform our processes, invest in the technical competency of our most valued asset, our people, and to be collaborative and transparent. Our strength is validated by earning trust in all we do by demonstrating technical expertise, competence, and professionalism across our organization. We earn our credibility, our reputation, and our values by delivering the program. This is our lifeblood, this is our passion, this is our mission. And this is my #1 priority. In all that we do, we strive to ensure that cost, timelines, and expected quality are understood up front and successfully accomplished in the end. In order to achieve our vision, we endeavor to anticipate the conditions, the challenges, the opportunities in an uncertain future by taking prudent, logical, and decisive steps today to prepare. We're doing this by implementing strategic transformation within the Corps, continually pursuing 4 goals outlined in our campaign plan with an aim point of 2035. Our first campaign goal is to continue to work across the globe with a presence in more than 110 countries supporting national security, and our combatant commanders in civil works, military missions, and water resource development expertise. We are proud to serve this great nation and our fellow citizens, and we're proud of the work the Corps does to support America's foreign policy. Our second goal is to continue to make the Corps more efficient and effective while delivering integrated water resource solutions for national missions and to address infrastructure challenges. This involves modernizing the project planning process and enhancing budget development for a more holistic outcome by making better risk-informed investment decisions and improving delivery methodology. Our third major goal is to continue to be proactive in reducing disaster risk and responding to disasters under national response and recovery support frameworks, as well as within our authorities for flood risk management. I'm very proud of our team for the work we do with FEMA and our other federal partners, as well as our state and local agencies in this area. Our fourth and final goal is preparing for tomorrow, which focuses on ensuring we have a pipeline of the best engineering and technical expertise, as well as a strong workforce development and talent management program. We continue to tailor developmental programs to employee aspirations to retain talent and instill a culture that embraces a career of service. In closing, I would offer that our excellence demands commitment of every Corps employee. As Chief of Engineers, I'm striving to what General Shinseki, the former Army Chief of Staff, called irreversible momentum towards being a world-class organization. World-class means that for the Corps to continue engineering solutions for the nation's toughest challenges, which is our vision, we must all be leaders of technical competence and superior integrity. You have my commitment that the teammates of the Corps have a passion to achieve that vision. Thank you for allowing me the time to address the committee today.
Thank you, General. I'm now going to recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Webster, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having this hearing. And General Semonite, thank you for your service to our country. And I know you know a lot about Florida, and that's good. Our 15 seaports and also National Treasury, which is the Everglades, Florida Everglades. So my question is there a day, a starting date where we'll be in earnest on the Central Everglades planning?
The SEP program has got unbelievable potential. I was the division commander in Atlanta for 3 years down there from 09 to 12. General Jackson backfilled me. We look back at the Central Everglades planning, and that particular project is probably being one of the most important things to continue to keep water flowing south. We've had significant challenges over the architecture of the old SERP project, and a lot of water has gone east and west, but we are fully committed to continue to keep that going. What I'd like to do is ask General Jackson to give you a quick update of exactly where we're at it, but you've got our commitment that this is where we see probably the most potential in solving not just some of the ecosystem issues down there, but other issues that are related back to the Florida system. Ed?
Thank you, sir. Congressman Webster, thank you very much for that question. I was very involved in pushing the Central Everglades Planning Project through to a chief's report, so I'm very familiar with it. As you know, most of the things on the integrated delivery schedule in South Florida are on a sequence, and this one is no different. And one of the things that we're working our way through right now is the need to do the validation studies for the different components of SEP that have to be done, but also there are a couple of other things that have to be done in advance of that. There are a couple of other projects that construction must be completed on, and those include modified waters, the C-111 South Dade, Broward County, and the C-111 impoundment. And so we're trying to focus our effort and priorities to getting those projects done and completed so we move forward as fast as possible on the Central Everglades project. There are also a couple of other issues with the non-federal sponsor on their restoration strategies that we're working with very closely on to get those constructed as well, so we can get all the preparatory work needed that has to be done that sets the conditions for SEP to be successful. And so we're committed to moving forward along those timelines. We had in the President's budget for this year $400,000 to apply against Central Everglades, and we're going to use that to continue to set conditions so that when we can get these other projects completed, we can move forward without any further hesitation to start implementing the requirements of Central Everglades.
Is there a date? A start date?
I don't have a start date with me, sir, but I'll get that back to the staff. I know it's on an integrated delivery schedule sequence chart that I have back in the office, and I can get you that when I get back.
Is the $200 million that was recently passed by the Florida legislature, does that help? Does that do, what does that do?
Sir, I'll need to get back with you on that as well. I'm not exactly sure how that $200 million is going to be allocated within the Central Florida program, but I can get that information back to you.
And, sir, we have met with Governor Scott. We know that there's an intent to be able to try to apply a lot of that back into fixing Herbert Hoover Dike. As to what the actual dollar is going to be, it might be something lower than that. But we are very receptive to be able to find ways of incorporating those funds back in. And to all of the committee, the nation doesn't have enough money to be able to handle all these requirements. So if there are ways that we can find through the authorities we have to take money from states to be able to accelerate some of these projects, we want to be very aggressive in doing that. And if we have our hands tied somewhere, we look forward to working with you to be able to figure a better way to be able to somehow defer some of those federal requirements back into states or to other entities.
Does the heavy rain south of Lake Okeechobee, does that affect the schedule? Does that slowed down things or anything?
We're not aware of any significant challenge. Obviously, the rain's down there. We watch every single day. But, I mean, just whether it's rain or drought, we're able to adjust. And right now, I'm not aware of any significant issues that those rains have on the schedule.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yield back.
Thank you. We're now going to go to the ranking member of the full committee, the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. DeFazio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, do you happen to have on hand the number for your construction backlog?
I do, sir, and I'm glad to be here today. In round numbers, and I can give you extreme detail if you'd like to, $75 billion. I'll break that into 3 sub-numbers. If you were to say what that would be in pre-2014, it'd be around $34 billion. If you look at numbers that could be included in the WRRDA 2014, that's probably about another $15.4 billion, and then in WRRDA 16, about another $10.8. And again, we can break those numbers down through business lines or different functions if you'd like to, but we're more than interested. We want to make sure that you understand that backlog so we can try to work together to work that down.
Okay, thank you. We would like some detail to see what we're foregoing. On your annual operations, not construction, but basically maintenance and that, we have I think some deferred maintenance too on top of that number, right?
Yes, sir.
And that would be about, no?
We'll have to probably give you
Okay.
the details on it, sir.
All right, yeah, I was given a number of, I think, 30 to 35 billion, but I would like confirmation on that. So I guess my question would be, if we had full use of the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund, both on an annual basis, the income, and the theoretical balance in the Treasury of $9 billion, would it be fair to say that that money could be rather quickly and appropriately spent to begin to deal with deferred maintenance?
Ranking Member DeFazio, as far as the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund, the FY18 budget was $5.002 billion, and 3.1 billion of that was devoted to operations and maintenance. And what we're looking at is across the nation. Since we have limited resources that are available to us, we're looking at the most competitive projects out there, the ones with a high demand relative to tonnage on the waterways. We're also looking at safety aspects. So I understand your concern about the reserve that's built up in the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund, and we continue to look at the targets and trying to move forward diligently and looking at predominantly the economics of the projects, the tonnage that's within that port, and also the ability to meet the targets. And I always say that we're meeting the targets not only on the Great Lakes, but on the emerging ports that were required by.
Well, I have an emerging port that was zero funded this year. I believe the Portland district identified it as needing work, but somehow when the national office sent back a list, that port, the Port of Umpqua, was zeroed out. Can you tell me why that happened?
Sir, General Seminat, we are very concerned about small and emerging ports. We look at every one of those states. You have 20 ports in your state to qualify. On my sheet, all the green, 16 of the 20 are funded either in the 18 budget or the 17 work plan. The specific port you're talking about was zeroed out initially. That was just because we were trying to do the budget so fast at the last minute. We have put money against that, and the dredging will be done by September 17 for Umpqua Port. The other thing is we're continuing to look through how can we continue to be able to get the rest of those ports done. In gross terms, in the 18 budget, you got $6.6 million for those 20 ports. And this is where the committee can really help out. Because the committee understood the shortage of the requirement, then obviously Congress passed a little bit additional money, and that comes through a work plan. In the work plan, then we're able to take and recommend where we think some money could solve some of those deficits. In the work plan for Oregon, you got another $10.8 million on top of the 6.6. So that's where we're able to take care of some of those small and emerging ports. And for anyone else on the committee, if you need that level of detail, we can give it to any of you to make sure we understand how critical those small and emerging harbors are.
I appreciate that, General. I appreciate what you're doing. I know you're trying to stretch the dollars as far as you can. And I just, on this side, and I've worked with the chairman on this, I really want to see that the taxes which are collected from the American consumer on the value, small tax on the value of imported goods, is spent on the intended purpose, and that we free up the annual income for the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund, and we begin to prudently spend down the balance to deal with some of these problems, so that the Corps is not stretched so thin that they have to choose, one place or another, both which need dredging, but say, sorry, we just can't get there. So hopefully we can do that in the next WRDA bill, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We're now going to go to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Gibbs, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to first address, just to make a comment on the opening statement by the ranking member about waters in the United States. The President's directive was for the Corps and the U.S. EPA to go back and work with the states and their local counterparts, the state EPAs, to address the Swank and Rapanos decisions, and also when doing that, to keep former late Justice Scalia's statement about pretty much tried to define navigable waters. But I've always said that the Clean Water Act was passed as a partnership between the states and the feds, and that the states should implement and enforce it under the guidance of the federal government. And so his directive, President's directive, was just to go back, directing the Corps and the EPA to go back and work with the states and not have over half the states sue the U.S. EPA and the Army Corps on this issue. And that's what that directive is about. It's not about going backwards. So I want to make that clear. Thank you for being here, gentlemen. A couple things. In the Section 1122 of the WIN Act established a pilot program for beneficial reuse of dredge material, and tying that in, because it's so important in the Great Lakes, the dredging issue. In WRDA 14, there's guidance on managing the Great Lakes navigation system as a single system. Those two specific sections, can you give us the status where we are on the dredge material for our pilot programs, and then also considering the Great Lakes as a single system, how you're going about your work now?
So, Representative Gibbs, I'm going to talk about the pilots, and I'll ask General Jackson to talk a little bit about the system. We are excited about this pilot initiative. We think it's a good way to go. We have gotten a lot of letters from a lot of you on recommending those pilots. What we want to do here is we want to, first of all, establish the criteria as to those, how are those pilots going to be picked. And we're working through that right now. We're going to put that out on a webinar. We're going to have it out for 60 days so everybody can have input on what's the criteria. And then once we do that, then we'll assess those products in there. Just as Chairman Graves said, though, we need to be more aggressive on trying to get all this implementation guidance done. And the fact that we're still working through some of this, we don't see a delay on this one. We want to get these pilots identified by the end of the calendar year, and we want to continue to work with all of you to make sure we understand the best we can do to get those pilots so that they're justified. But there's no shortage of nominations for them. We're aggressively trying to work this pilot program, but we want to do it where we're collaborative, get the criteria on the street, everybody comment on the criteria, and then we'll assess the pilots back against the criteria. Ed, can you hit the second point that the representative had?
Congressman Gibbs, just to clarify one point on the implementation guidance too, that's one of our top priority ones, and we're trying to make sure we work really hard to get it right. I think based on the last schedule that I saw and the last several discussions that I've had within our staff, we're pretty close to finalizing the implementation guidance for that. I think we should have it out sometime in the next month or so. So we're going to keep working that, and that's a huge priority, not only for Ohio, but for the whole nation to try to get that right. And we appreciate the Congress giving us the opportunity to look at these in a unique way. So could I get you, if you don't mind, to repeat the second question that General?
Well, in WRDA 14, we set it up with guidance that Great Lakes be considered as a system, a unit. And so when you're going about your work, I just wanted an update on, the functioning of that as a unit, because as we know in the Great Lakes, the ports are all interdependent so much, and so I just wanted to your thoughts of the mental process, I guess, how you're getting there, and that establishment on funding and all that. And I'll just tie that into my second part of the question with the Sioux locks too. I didn't mention that yet, but I wanted to before I run out of time. We sent a letter. The Great Lakes members of both the Senate and the House sent a letter to you and General Semonite on February about the BCR, benefit cost ratio, and so I need an update on that, and if you're going to use the same criteria as you do in all locks, because in our letter we put there was a criteria about offloading and conveying and loading, which doesn't seem like a lot of sense to me either, but I think the Sioux locks are a national significant importance, and we ought to be a top priority along with Mr. Babin's issue down in Houston, as you well know. So, you know, I just tie that together, how important the Great Lakes are and how you're looking at that as a unit when it comes to funding in the SULOCs.
So let me jump in first. When you write me a letter, I normally go there. I try to be on the ground and try to look. I just came back from SULOC. I spent 3 days up in the Great Lakes. And everything up there is this system. We look at how does the process go through all the Great Lakes. If we're going to do something where we don't want a critical point that is going to slow down other things. So whether it's the environmental part, where's EPA and GLRLI money? How do you make sure you have the right kind of money coming back in to be able to take care of that? So we're committed to do that through all those different business lines. Now, specifically SULOCs, I had heard about it a long time, but I had never actually seen it. I was amazed at the potential of that particular lot and how it takes care of the economy and continues to be able to have a single source. 100% of iron ore goes through that. I met with all the shippers up there, and I met with all the steel industries, and had on the front of SULOC to be able to understand how we can do that. The recent Homeland Defense report specifically identifies the risk to our economy if that were to go down. You know, there's 4 channels. We're only really using one for the big ships going through. Yeah. I personally think that we have to find a unique way of trying to figure out how to justify that particular project. Just the BCR, if you were to put it in the rack and stack of all other projects, doesn't identify the significance of what the value of that particular one back to the nation, only because it's a one-of-a-kind kind of a lock. So this is where we want to work with the committee to try to make sure that we're doing everything we can that you understand the significance of that lock, and therefore hopefully let it compete for the appropriate amount of funding. And I'll certainly let Mr. Lamont or General Jackson jump in.
Congressman Gibbs, thank you for the opportunity to jump in here. I share the Corps of Engineers' concern about moving the economic reevaluation report along. We're doing everything we can do to make sure this thing is funded so that we can deliver the final product and hopefully, you know, result in a report that will be able to take to the administration for concurrence.
Sir, and that district has said they'll get it done in 7 months. We're working some funding challenges right now to let them get the study done, but I looked that colonel in the eye and said, I need this thing done as fast as we can. I'd like it done by the end of the year. It is contingent back on the money, but that's our issue. We'll try to figure that out.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I'm out of time. Thank you, General.
Thank you. We're going to go to the gentleman from California, Mr. Lowenthal, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. I have really 2 questions. One primarily that pertains to my district, some of the issues, and one that really has to do with an issue that I've become more familiar with recently, and that has to do with the beneficial use of dredged material. I represent in California the Port of Long Beach, which is the 2nd busiest seaport in the nation. It's part of a harbor complex with the Port of LA that moves approximately 40% of the nation's cargo, container cargo, in and out of our country. The Port of Long Beach is the subject of an Army Corps feasibility study on a series of navigation improvements to construct an anchorage for large liquid bulk vessels, to deepen several approach channels, basins, berths, to improve navigation for both container ships and for liquid terminals, and for liquid tankers, not terminals. The Los Angeles District is scheduled to submit its draft report on October 16th. First question is, will that target date be met? Study is expected to be completed next July, but the administration's budget request anticipates no funding for new construction on water resources project. How does delayed initiation of construction affect these projects? Does it mean that we have to go back and conduct the review again? Does it increase costs? You know, my local stakeholders are spending $1.5 million on this study. And the question is, what's the value of the study to them if the Corps is not going to fund any new construction projects? So that's the first question. Second question I'll also ask before you answer is Section 1122 of the WIN Act required that the Army Corps of Engineers begin to implement a pilot program for the beneficial use of dredged material within 90 days. This is a topic that Congressman Graves has educated me on, especially about the minimal use of dredged materials to enhance the Louisiana wetlands. So I've learned over the last few years about this issue. It's now nearly 4 months past the 90-day deadline to start this project, and we haven't seen any implementation guidance for this section. What's the delay in moving forward with this guidance? When can we expect it? How can you assure me that the implementation of this program will move forward in a timely manner. We've heard that nearly 100 beneficial use projects have been submitted by states, by stakeholders, and Army Corps of Engineer districts to be one of the 10 projects, pilot projects. This program now seems like it has huge support from local communities. The question is, how do you plan on deciding which projects will be included in the initial 10 pilots? What's going to be the process for soliciting projects? Will there be a public process to select the 10 projects? How will you make sure this isn't just happening behind closed doors? And when can we expect a decision on these 10 projects? So those are the two. Why go through the feasibility study if we're not constructing anything? And what's that going to be? And let's talk about what we, in a bipartisan way, are very concerned about, and that's the pilot, making sure that we implement the pilot program for the beneficial use of dredge materials. Thank you.
Congressman, I'd like to take a chance to answer both of those questions for you. And I'll start off with the Port of Long Beach.
Thank you.
And what I would say on that is the draft feasibility study is due to be out in October as per the schedule, according to the latest report that I got. So we're in good shape there. I know that we did receive funding, obviously, in the work plan and also in the budget, which will help us along with carry-in funds to get all the final feasibility study done and out in 19, which is when it's scheduled to go out.
But I understand. So you're talking about we're going to get that feasibility study. What about the construction?
Well, yes, sir. The construction, obviously, I can't speculate on what the administration is going to allow us to fund or what we'll get new starts on into the future. But what I'm committing to in the Corps is to try to get the study done so we can get the authorization in. Because without the authorization, obviously, there would be no construction to be had. So what I'm committing to today is to push with everything we have within the control we have of that feasibility report to get that delivered so that it can compete favorably, hopefully among other interests, to receive a new start and construction funding.
And that's all we ask for. And
so that's what we'll do. As to the
1122.
As to the 1122, sir, again, that is we're 4 months behind schedule, and I have no excuse, so I won't make one. What I will say, though, is that we are committed to getting the evaluation criteria right, so that, and I'm thrilled to death.
You should always be committed to getting it right.
Yes, sir. I'm thrilled to hear the amount of participation that we're getting from the states in identifying opportunities for this, because this is a huge issue for the Corps, much bigger than the 10 studies that we have the opportunity to look at in this particular provision. The dredge material management program overall is something that we are looking at very closely in the Corps of Engineers, and this pilot study will really help us to determine some best case ways to work dredge material management to make the most beneficial use all across the nation to solve other problems that we have. So we're committed to doing this. We are scheduled to have the implementation guidance out in the next month or so. This is definitely designed to be collaborative and transparent in how we put this together. So as we finalize the implementation guidance and we develop the evaluation criteria that will be contained in that, we'll do that collaboratively. We'll make sure that the committee sees what we're doing and how we're doing it, and we'll take feedback to make sure that we get it right.
Well, thank you. But just before I yield back, I'd just like to impress upon you, in a Congress that frequently is criticized for not acting in a bipartisan way, this message is coming to you in a bipartisan way. We want to see this program implemented.
And, sir, to answer your specific question, we want those pilots identified by the end of the calendar year of this year.
And, sir, if I could jump in here real quick. Army Civil Works is working diligently with Headquarters U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to make these things happen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go to the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Rouser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate our witnesses being here today, and I have a list of local projects that I have an interest in, and I see the general smiling, so maybe he knows of some of them. First, there at Wrightsville Beach, which obviously is in my district, one of the most beautiful places you could ever go. I'm curious what the timeline for the post-authorization change report is, if you can give me any update on that.
So I'll let Ed look up the timeline where I'm looking at it, but you know we got a 902 limit we're concerned about. $24 million. We're at 23 right now. So we want to get this packer done. So in no way does that, come close to that. If we don't find the date here in a couple of minutes, we'll get back to your staff, make sure you know. But we're tracking exactly where this is at, and nourishment of that beach is critical. So we want to make sure we keep this as a priority.
Now, one question I have directly related to that, with the limit, the Section 902 limit. Does it make sense, really, to limit the cost of a project that spans 50 years based on the cost estimates calculated in the 1980s? It seems like we need to readjust that. Have we ever thought about readjusting that?
I think that's a very interesting question, Congressman. I have not personally thought about it, but I think relative to hurricane storm damage reduction projects, coastal storm damage reduction projects, the 50-year life is a consideration relative to the development of the plan, of the economics, and obviously, as you point out, through the initial construction and then periodic nourishments, the cost of the project. You might want to collaborate and talk further about that. I think you raise an interesting point.
Thank you. Just south of there at Carolina Beach, they've been trying to get the study for the beach renourishment evaluation report since 2014. The basic question is, why is this taking so long? Is there a need for such an arduous process to get a cost-benefit ratio analysis for a project that has historically been proven to be good and necessary? And the other obvious question is, why can't we speed up this process by allowing some decisions to be made at the district level?
So I think the answer to the last half of that, one of the things, and I've talked to Chairman Graves about this, I think over the last several years, we have allowed some things to migrate to Washington, D.C. that perhaps are not the right things to be there. So Mr. Lamont and I are working very carefully to be able to figure out how do we delegate a lot of this back down. We can talk 408s, we can talk other areas, but we have done a lot of work to be able to push some things back to the divisions or back down to the districts to try to make sure that some of those decisions are down there. We do have a full sheet on Carolina Beach. Ed, I don't know if you've got the specifics on it, but this one here, we certainly are tracking where it's at in the work plan. We did put an extra $12 million against that one, and if need be, I'll come back over and see you and give you specific details on Carolina Beach.
Can we get confirmation that those funds can be carried forward to fiscal year 2019? That certainly helps in terms of planning.
I see no problem with that as far as we know of. So unless there's a reason, we would say yes, but I would see no reason why we couldn't carry those in.
A couple other things, moving a little further south in my district from there. A provision that we included in WRRDA last year in 2016, dealing with a no-wake zone there at Southport Marina. And this is a little pet project of mine because I've been there. I've seen the potential for a disaster. You've got a fuel dock sitting right there. The locals, state and local officials, have talked to me about the incidents that have already occurred. You have recreational vehicles that are flying through there, huge wakes that hit folks when they're fueling up there at that fuel dock. And there's a number of different minor accidents that have already occurred because of that. I don't see why the Corps cannot work with the local and state officials to establish a no-wake zone there. It would not affect commercial traffic. We made that very clear in the language.
So, Representative, this is a great question because you sent me a letter the 1st of May, and I looked at it, and I said, this has got to be like a 2 or 3 day to be able to figure this out. Why are we waiting a year and a half? And so as we blow back, and it goes back to what Chairman Graves said on implementation guidance. So as I get back into this thing, this gets extremely confusing because it goes back to what's the rights of people that are navigating the inland waterway versus what about personal safety on rec areas? So, and that's a very, very contentious question. And I want General Jackson to walk you through that, but what we're trying to do is make sure that if, in fact, we establish guidance, it's going to be the same as it is in North Carolina versus Florida or anywhere else in the inland waterway. Ed, can you clarify a little bit more?
Yes, sir. Congressman, thank you for the question. Just some quick clarification on what General Semonite said. You know, we got about 1,200-mile waterway. We got about 500 marinas in there. And we lack the ability to police all of that with no wake zone. So what we're trying to figure out as we work through the implementation guidance is how can we take the intent of Congress that came out in the implementation guidance, work it closely with the Coast Guard, who will help us with all the enforcement actions, and then engage with individual states and locals who have very specific problems, as the one you just mentioned. So we're very laser focused on that one because we already know that's a problem. I don't know about the other 499 marinas that are out there, but we've got to write the guidance in a way that allows us to execute what needs to be done to maintain safety. And that's our number one concern, is the safety, as you just described. So we owe you that implementation guidance. We're trying to synchronize that, and we're trying to, as quickly as possible, get that completed so we can service the target that you're talking about as quickly as possible, because we're already sort of ahead of the game there in North Carolina. But there'll be others that come out. We just want to make sure we have that right.
Well, I've been there. I've seen the traffic, and in season, it is very, very congested. You got folks flying through there. It is a disaster waiting to happen, and I think we need to do everything we can to prevent that. It seems to me we try to pursue these cookie-cutter approaches, and every situation's a little different. You know, it's one of those things where I think good common sense and just good courtesy you know, would address the issue, and the bureaucratic maze that you're going through in order to adopt a very common sense measure just is a little flabbergasting to me. So I appreciate your attention to it.
Congressman, we're definitely tracking this. We already met with the 3 stars at the Coast Guard to be able to work through some of this. So you have our commitment to continue to resolve it. As Ed said, though, we want to make sure we don't try to do some type of guidance that ends up having second and third order effects.
Sure.
It causes more problems on the other hand. So we've got to come up with the right solution for those people, because it is a life safety issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to the gentleman from California, Mr. Garamendi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, but I believe Ms. Estes was here before me.
Common sense.
I'll yield to her.
Recognize the gentleman from Connecticut for 5 minutes, Ms. Estes.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Garamendi. You get Chivalry Award of the day. Thank you. Well, thank you, Chairman Graves and Ranking Member DeFazio, for holding today's important hearing on the implementation of the Water Resources Reform Development Act of 2014 and WRDA 2016. And I want to thank our witnesses here today, Mr. Lamont, Lieutenant General Semonite, and Major General Jackson. And actually, Lieutenant General Semonite, as a member of the Veterans Committee, I really want to thank you for the Corps' commitment to hiring veterans and for our wounded warriors. I understand there are 1,300 that you may have deployed through the Corps and elsewhere, and that's a really important commitment. So I want you specifically to thank you for that. As we discuss WRDA 2014 and 16, I want to focus on programs in my district, in the 5th Congressional District of Connecticut. There are 13 flood management projects, flood risk management projects in my district, including dams, reservoirs, and local protection projects. All 13 of these create local jobs, prevent hundreds of millions of dollars in flood damage, and have spurred recreational tourism that is very important to the state. I'll give you an example. Hop Brook Lake Dam on Hop Brook Lake holds back 2.2 billion gallons of water, and the estimates are that it would be $108 million of flooding damage if that were to go. The recreation attracts 200,000 visitors a year, 2 million of economic activity, and that's just one of the 13 projects in my district, where water is everywhere in Northwest Connecticut, and we really need to manage it. Now, many of these projects date back to the 50s and 60s, and we were discussing ahead of the hearing how that was sort of the heyday of the Corps. That's when my grandfather worked on Corps projects in the Midwest. But given the age of those projects, quite a number of them would be appropriate for temporary or permanent alteration requiring a Section 408 review. Now, looking at that budget, we're not at the end of the fiscal year. We've got 2.5 months left to go, and there's 95% of those funds have been expended already. Is there any funding available to do 408 review? So I'm going to lay a couple questions out. That will delay projects, right? If they don't go to 408 review, then you can't move forward. And if we're not going to have enough funding, what would you recommend that we put in those budgets for 2018? We're putting together budgets right now, and we should have appropriate funding. And the last question, because I'm going to just put them all out there and then give you folks time to respond, is continuing authorities projects. The CAP programs are very important in my district. A lot of the communities have used them, but again, we keep running through the money. Can someone tell me how many projects, what percentage of the projects that might be eligible actually receive funding? And again, what if we wanted to fund all of them, about what will we be looking at? So with that, I await your answers. Thank you.
So, ma'am, great questions. And let me hit a couple of these, and I'll let General Jackson hit the cap one. 408s are very critical. We talked about delegate them. Chairman Graves and I have talked about that. We need to do more in 408s, but we can get more into detail as to who approves them and what level that's at. There is an issue with funding. In 16, we had $4 million. In 17, we only had $3 million to do 408s. We were able to reprogram an extra $500,000 for 3.5. Even this morning, Mr. Lamont and I asked our staff, can we make it to the 1st of October? They assured me that on those that are critical, we're going to find ways of doing that. Doesn't mean we have all the money we need to have, but we're stretching that money as much as we can to the 1st of October. Now, next in 18, we have 8.5. So we'll be okay once we get to the 1st of October. I'm not going to tell you it's perfect, but we don't think that any critical projects will be held up because of 408s. And if any of you have those, then we'll certainly come back and let you know what we can do to fix it. The other thing before I go to General Jackson, I do just want to say that you talked about veterans. The Corps not only works, obviously, Civil Works, but we are very, very committed, and we've been asked by the Veterans Administration to be able to do 14 of their big hospital upgrades. We're doing about $8.5 billion in VA hospitals all around the United States. We couldn't be happier to work for a better organization to take care of our veterans out there. We're excited to do that. Ed, can you talk CAP real quick?
Congresswoman, I appreciate the question on the Continuing Authorities Program. I think your question was, what are the number of eligible projects that actually received funding? And so if—
Percentage, what percentage?
Yes, and so if that's okay, I'm going to get that information and lay that out for you in greater detail so you know specifically which ones those are rather than just a number. So I'll follow back up with you and your staff at a later date to give you that information.
Thank you. And again, I know we've got, new representation in our district up in Boston. Look forward to having him in to see our wonderful, beautiful Northwest Connecticut and the projects there. Mr. Lamont?
Congresswoman, I just want to echo what General Semonite said about the 408 program. We hear loud and clear from all members and constituents a concern about the delays. We are making concerted efforts to make sure this program is funded, to do our due diligence and to the American taxpayer and obviously to the communities that want to explore this opportunity. So we're doing everything we can in conjunction with headquarters here to make it happen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Esty. I want to perhaps give you a different perspective on that. I appreciate your interest in 408, and General, you and I have talked about this a little bit. Nothing in the law has changed in 408 for over 100 years. And we have seen this explosive growth in how 408 has been exercised within the Corps of Engineers. I'm not sure we need additional money. I think there needs to be a reevaluation of what 408 is, what congressional intent was over 100 years ago with 408. There have been some aggressive amendments that have passed the House of Representatives in regard to reining this back in, and I want to continue making sure that we're working on this to prevent projects from being obstructed. I'm going to go to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mast.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your testimony this morning. I appreciate it. I want to talk about Lake Okeechobee also, and the Everglades, everything that's going on down south of Lake Okeechobee and north of Lake Okeechobee as well. General Jackson, you noted already in your comments just how important it is to get all of the preparatory work done in these projects. You just said that. I couldn't agree more. And General Semonite, you just said in your remarks, it's important to keep water flowing south and that a lot of water has already flowed east and west. I'm out the east coast of that where all that water flows. And you also said that if there are ways to take money from the states to complete these projects, you're certainly most receptive to that. The federal government doesn't have all the money to do that. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. You know, Congress has already approved a reservoir south of Lake Okeechobee as part of that integrated delivery schedule. The state of Florida has authorized and committed to matching funds to expedite the Everglades Agricultural Area Southern Storage Reservoir. And the South Florida Water Management District has said that they've reached out to the Corps saying that the Corps is the appropriate partner for expediting this project. So I just wanted to ask a few questions on that. What do you think is the earliest completion date we can get that southern reservoir done? And
Congressman, I think you're talking about a new reservoir that's not already in SERP. Is that understood?
It's one that was originally authorized as part of the integrated delivery schedule.
Okay, I'm with you now. So there are three that we're looking at. C-44 is the one that we call Indian River Lagoon. That one has been funded both in 18 and 17 in that work plan. I'll get you an exact date on that one, but we don't see any significant issue on that. The two you're probably worried about
specifically, not to interrupt you, but the one that's referenced in the state of Florida as Senate Bill 10, that's, if you're familiar with it as that one, we're talking about SB 10 in the state of Florida, that southern storage reservoir just south of Lake Okeechobee. That's what I'm referencing here.
And sir, I'm gonna have to get back. I got C-23 and C-24. I don't have a good read on SP-10. But let me come in, we'll lay this out for you and answer all your questions. This is a very, very complicated, problem you're aware of, but I want to make sure that we're giving you the right answer on this. Ed, do you have SB10? You tracking?
No, sir. We'll follow up with your staff and give you a complete laydown on it.
I know you all noted how much work you'd done in the state of Florida, so it's been probably one of the biggest issues that's gone on in the State House and the State Senate in Florida, this SB10 that's been going on there. I can't imagine how...
There is some proposals that we're hearing about that the state does want to do some things, and we want to make sure that those are integrated back into the other existing Everglades projects. And this is where we want to make sure that South Florida Water Management District and the rest of it, I think that's where some of the issues might be, is not a current core project right now. We want to figure out how we can work together with you, whether we should or should not do it. I think that's what we're working through.
What benefit would it be to have authorization to begin these feasibility studies sooner rather than later? How many years can you knock off if you get these studies done sooner rather than later? Can you expedite these processes by starting the studies sooner?
So I think without looking at the integrated delivery schedule, I think the sooner we can start studies, assuming that all the preparatory work that's in sequence has to be done in sequence before that, can be done. I mean, we should be able to move out faster on it. I would need to look at each individual study and each individual project line to figure out where we can buy additional time and what additional resources might be required in order to do that. But certainly, South Florida Water Management District and the state of Florida have been tremendous partners with us through the whole life cycle of this project. And so, I welcome any continued discussions to see how we can move faster on this.
I want to shift gears. Same subject, a little bit different piece of the conversation in a moment here. The Corps, last summer, the Corps of Engineers transferring, over a million gallons of water a minute in some cases from Lake Okeechobee into the waters east and west of Lake Okeechobee. And oftentimes there have been massive algal blooms that were literally being transferred from one of those bodies to a body of water that didn't have those algal blooms in them. So I want to ask about that. When the Corps is transferring debris or toxins or pollutants from one body of water to another body of water that otherwise wouldn't be affected by them, who do you think should pay to clean that up?
Sir, I'll jump in here for starters. Relative to the nationwide issue, not only in the state of Florida, it's the state's responsibilities to ensure the quality of the waters. Now, I understand what you're saying relative to runoff into Lake Okeechobee and the distribution canals, if you will, from...
Not runoff. The Corps taking an algal bloom from Lake Okeechobee and moving it into a completely separate river to the east and west of Lake Okeechobee, not runoff.
Those algal blooms, sir, generally are as a result of the pollutants coming into the system. I think it would be a concerted effort relative to the federal government looking at what the states are doing, the counties and municipalities, relative to their wastewater treatment and what is being dumped into the water body that ultimately comes into Lake Okeechobee and then is therefore distributed during flood reduction needs, out of Lake Okeechobee. Your point is well taken. There needs to be a holistic view on that, but generally speaking, it's the states and the municipalities that are responsible for the quality of their waters.
My time has expired. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. We can go to the gentleman from California, Mr. Garamendi, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Generals and Mr. Lamont, thank you so very much for the work that the Corps of Engineers does all across this nation, and particularly in my district, the Sacramento Valley District. We've had very good relationships with the ever-revolving number of colonels that have come through. most recently Colonel Heminger at the South Pacific. So my thanks to all the work that you do. That's not to say there are not always issues. Of course there are, and I have my list of them also. The Hamilton City project underway, specifically it's going along. There's been some funding issues, particularly the removal of funding for the 2017 omnibus. The issue here is not that the project will go forward. We've been told that it will, but it's really, can you give us an early heads up? And this is just a matter of transparency, and if you could make that standard operating procedure, it would be helpful to all of us.
Thanks, Congressman. And again, our guys are more than willing to come lay this out in more detail if you want to. So did very well in 16, got $15 million. In 17, the reason there wasn't money put it against it on the work plan is we actually had carryover from 16 that came into 17. There was no work that wasn't done in 17 because we didn't have enough money. In 18, it's doing well at $8.3 million, and right now it looks like we're going to award the next phase in 18. So we want to continue to keep priority on Hamilton City. We're tracking it, and right now we don't see any necessarily delay of the project, but it did not get budgetary money in 17, mainly because we were able to handle that capability with carryover from the prior year.
General, I don't know if my colleagues on this committee have noticed, but I have yet to see such a well-prepared general appear before us. Is there any issue that you anticipate from any of us that you are not prepared to brief us on?
So I think the biggest single thing that we lay awake worrying about...
No, you've missed my point, General. I just want to compliment you and your staff for an exceptionally well-prepared briefing. Every time we're called upon, you're running through that big stack of papers, and you know exactly the questions we're going to ask, so congratulations and thank you for that. We've gone through the 408 issues. The chairman has spoken to this issue. It's an ongoing issue. The 408s are slow in being processed. The numerous numbers that you're faced with. If there's a underlying statutory issue, we will try to deal with that. We know that there's an ongoing funding issue. So I won't go back into that. Also, the committee has already brought up the issue of the beneficial use of dredged materials. The San Francisco Bay region, the Delta, Sacramento, San Joaquin Delta are in line. I know you're going to come up with a report. I think it's sometime in September if I follow the earlier questions. So we don't go back and, since I'm in Forum District, we say we don't need to plow the field a second time. But we do need to dredge a second time, so I'll just let it go at that. In your testimony, you raised something that is really, we've never really discussed here, and I just want to raise this issue. I guess this is actually Mr. Lamont, and no, it's yours, General Cement. You say, first, we continue our work across the globe with presence in more than 110 countries supporting national security and our combatant commanders with civil works, military missions, water research, and development expertise. Would you please deliver to the subcommittee the amount of money in your budget, in the OCO budget, and any other budget that you are spending around the world on those many, many projects in support of national security? I've never seen in the many years that I've been involved in this a specific enumeration of the resources of the United States that are spent by the Army Corps of Engineers on those many, many projects.
Sure, we'll definitely do that. And just to give you a very, very short answer, we, the Army Corps of Engineers, work for several different entities. We work for the Navy, the Air Force, the Department of Defense. A lot of that money that we're doing around the world is OCO money, or it is money that is funneled through those COCOMs to be able to do it. Another good example is we work for the Interagency. The Economy Act allows us to work for the Interagency. So we're in Mosul today, in the Mosul Dam. We've been working there a year, trying to make sure the Mosul Dam doesn't break and leave have 11 billion gallons going downstream. That's That's Department of State money with a little bit of augmentation from Department of Defense. But we're more than willing to lay that out for you because these other nations also have civil works challenges. And where we have a body of knowledge that we can share, given the right authority to share that, we want to be able to make sure that our technology advances are going to other countries so they can benefit as well.
I appreciate that, and one of the reasons I used the word revolving kernels is you took the colonel that was working on our projects in the Sacramento Valley and sent him to Mosul. And he certainly understands the issue of seepage beneath levees and dams. I thank you for that. My time has expired, but I would appreciate that information as it is money that is otherwise not available for domestic projects. So thank you for that, and thank you for the work that you do, and for being so very, very well prepared.
Thank you. We're going to go to the distinguished gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Woodall, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to echo Mr. Garamendi's comments about this panel. You see the dais filling up a little bit. I think the word is getting out, Mr. Garamendi, that this is worth being a part of. It's so frustrating to set this time aside where we could really do some great things together and find folks who are unprepared to work with us. So I'm grateful to you for all the time you put in ahead of time as well. I don't have a core project in the district that I want to talk about, but I do have one off the coast of the great state of Georgia. I know funds are limited in these times, and I remember the first core estimate of the dredging in the Port of Savannah that I saw said, hey, we think we can get this done in about 6.5 years. The best way to maximize taxpayer resources, it'll be on about a 6.5 year build. We're stretching that number out now. General Semonite, in your opening statement, it spoke to me. We earn our credibility, our reputation, our value by delivering the program. I know that's where your focus is. We have constituent concerns here. You have a program to deliver. Help me to understand the merit when the administration controls some of those dollars, those allocation of resources. What's the merit of spreading those in a thin way across the entire country instead of targeting the highest economic benefit projects? Now, if we're talking about flood control, as Ms. Esty talked about earlier, I understand that's a different issue, different degree of urgency when we're talking about lives and property. But when we're talking about deep draft dredging, help me understand the merit of funding multiple projects over funding one, getting it done, and then funding the next. How are we maximizing taxpayer resources?
Sir, if I understand your question correctly,
It's not lost on me, Mr. Lamont, that question is being deferred to the senior official performing the duties of the Assistant Secretary of the Army. That is a challenging title to have to shoulder, and I appreciate you shouldering it.
It certainly is, sir, and that's a challenging question relative to the funding that the limited funding that the Corps of Engineers is provided and how we have to prioritize. A lot of this comes down to economics. It comes down to life safety issues also. And we balance that. For flood damage reduction projects, clearly we're looking at economics. We're looking at the potential for life safety issues. But for navigation projects, they're primarily driven by the economics. It's called the NED benefits, national economic benefits that are delivered to the nation. And all ports are in competition with each other, not only amongst themselves, but they're in competition for available federal funding. We're finding a lot of project sponsors are not able to wait long enough for federal funding to qualify. Therefore, they're signing project partnership agreements with us where they are willing to upfront a lot of the federal and non-federal funds to get these key projects moving. And we support that. Well, I don't know if I've answered your question directly.
Well, I don't think so. We've certainly done that in Georgia. We ponied up the money up front. We want to be good partners in that space. But what I don't understand on behalf of the American taxpayer is how having two unfinished projects is superior economically to having one finished project. We've got these deep draft projects going on across the country, knowing that there are not enough dollars to fund them all. What other than economic interest is the driver in making those allocations from the administration's point of view? We are costing the taxpayer money by delaying projects. We are costing the taxpayer money by stretching things out over more years instead of getting them done in a compact amount of time. I understand my project may win, my project may lose. I don't understand how the American taxpayer wins by underfunding multiple projects instead of properly funding one.
Another good point, sir. And within our $5.002 billion program, we're roughly about $1.2 billion for construction activities. With this FY18 budget, the administration put an emphasis on basically moving the construction that's underway along to complete it as soon as possible. At the same time, we're trying to complete feasibility studies. Over the last 2 fiscal years, there was a lot of work plan money for 16 studies that we're trying to get moving along so they will qualify for new start, possible construction consideration. But with that small amount of available construction funding, everything is so tightly in competition that it comes down to the benefit cost ratio. And as I know a number of your members know, that comes down to a benefit cost ratio of 2.5 to 1 at a 7% discount rate to qualify for available federal funding. So that's why you're seeing a lot of these ports jump in the game right now and saying, we can't wait. If it's an authorized project, we want to start the project now and help you along. You'll see Charleston Harbor, for example, doing that right now.
Well, there are a lot of families in my part of the world who put food on the table because of the success your projects bring economically to our region. I'm grateful to you for your service.
Thank you. We're going to go to the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Franco, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you, all of you, for your service for Florida, obviously, with sand and dredging and ports and Everglades, very important to our economic and environmental well-being, and so working with you is important. I have 4 questions. I'm going to try to get through them quickly so that you can answer them. Number 1, I thought I heard you say that there are some blockages using Florida state resources in order to move forward with Everglades funding. Number 2 question, in our last WRDA bill, and then I think the next one was called the WIN bill, something like that, right? WIN. We gave you all a 3-year deadline, basically, from authorization of a feasibility study to get that completed. I'm just wondering if you're optimistic that's something you're going to be able to meet. My next question is it true that ports are being told that in order to get a new start, they have to actually agree to fully fund the project? And number 4, this is what, and I bring this up every year, it still makes no sense to me why OMB uses a different discount rate than the Corps in evaluating projects. The Army Corps spends millions of dollars putting together chiefs reports, and then OMB uses a different calculation, and that doesn't make any sense. And I'm just wondering whether you're trying to correct that issue.
Congresswoman, let me jump in on number 3 and number 4. They seem to be pretty related.
Okay.
Number 3, if I understand your question correctly. Well, let me go to 4 first, because the competition for federal funding, as I alluded to Congressman Waddell over there, is a key driver here. With the available federal resources we got, we need to, bottom line, we need to be able to look at the economics of what that project is delivering and how that will compete, therefore, after it's authorized for federal funding. For authorization purposes, the benefit cost ratio has to be 1.0 to 1 or greater at the authorized discount rate, and that's right now right about 2.875%. However, because of the tight federal funding that is available for the Civil Works program, the administration, no matter what administration, Democrat, Republican, for going way back to 1992, utilized a benefit cost ratio of 2.5 to 1 at a 7% discount rate to qualify for budgeting.
Excuse me, I'm aware of that, but it doesn't make, what I'm saying is it doesn't make any sense, because you're doing your feasibility study first, which now is going to take 3 years, we hope, and sometimes costs millions and millions of dollars, and you use a different study, a different discount rate, so you could do all that work, and then OMB says, "Oh, sorry, we don't agree." So it doesn't make sense that you don't get your acts together, that you're not using the same formula. One of you needs to change it, right?
Well, I would say this, ma'am, and in all due respect here, with the federal resources that are available to our agency, we must look at the most economic high-performing projects, if you will, and that is based on economics. The administration, this one and prior administrations have determined that is the...
All right, I'm sorry, you're not answering my question. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude to you. How about trying the other three? Because really, you're not answering my question. You're telling me what I already know, but you're not explaining why. Why you use different discount rates.
The discount rate is reflecting the competition for funds.
Okay.
And ma'am, General Semonite, let me hit the other three real quick, okay? And you've got a lot of things you want to hear about. You want to talk about SEP, Port Everglades. We're more than willing to come lay all this out for you in your office. But real quick, short answer, we aren't aware of any problems right now with Florida funding. That's your first question. Sometimes when people want to offer money, though, there's different ways they offer it. They offer it with an expectation of getting repaid, or they offer it as a contributed fund. Maybe that's where the confusion, but we are not aware of any problem. Second one is on the 3-year study. It is our goal, and the committee, I think, has pushed us in the right direction to try to get all of our studies done in 3 years. That has changed the culture of the Corps. Some of these are extremely complicated. Back to Savannah Harbor. That's about a 17-year study we did, way too long. Some of these might not get done in 3 years, and we have a waiver process, but it is our goal to try to be as aggressive as possible. And then the third one, there is not a requirement right now to have fully funded for ports before we can do that. There's not where they have to put all their money in. They have to be able to make sure that they can promise that money in that agreement. But right now, we are not aware of any, especially probably back on Port Everglades, where there's a significant issue there on any of those Florida ports. But we'll lay this out in detail if you want on all your ports, where we at on the Everglades, SEP, and Port Everglades specifically, okay?
Okay, well, thank you very much. But I really hope you could take another look at this cost ratio question that I have.
Ma'am, I would be happy to meet with you or your staff to further explain this.
Okay.
I want to make sure that I'm answering your question specifically. I understand fully your concern that it looks like a dichotomy. I understand fully.
Okay, and thank you again for your service, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman from Texas, Dr. Babb is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lamont, I'd like to talk about a proposed Cedar Bayou dredging project that's in my district. I first want to give you just a few facts on Cedar Bayou. Cedar Bayou is a fully authorized project waiting for a construction new start since 2006, 11 years. The local sponsor has paid in full the local share of the initial cost of the project and can execute a public partnership agreement with the Corps as soon as required. The project can be completed in less than 2 years. The project feeds into the Houston Ship Channel, the busiest port in foreign tonnage in the United States, a great benefit. It is one of the least expensive projects ready for construction at approximately $50 million. I would also point out that if you incorporate the impact of this port has on our energy sector, and I submit that my district is the epicenter of energy production in this country, if you incorporate the impact of this port using the Section 6009 calculation, the benefit to cost ratio is exceeding 5 to 1. Can you first tell me what else that you could possibly be looking for in a project when you're making a new start determination?
Mr. Congressman, this gets right back to Congresswoman Frankel's question relative to the benefit cost ratio and how the Corps of Engineers formulates and justifies its projects. I agree with you that their Section 6009 benefits are legitimate benefits that can be shown in Chief of Engineers reports and feasibility reports. But when it comes to, again, this is a thing that probably will annoy everybody here, but when it comes to competition for federal resources for a construction decision, it all comes back to the benefit cost ratio at the 7% discount rate being 2.5 to 1 or greater for qualification purposes. And that's, we have a project right now, Brownsville Harbor, Texas, where we've coordinated with the Office of Management and Budget, and we are continuing to look into the economics of that, and that it gets right to your issue as to how to display the benefits to the nation under the National Economic Development, National Economic Benefits, NED benefits, versus Section 6009. I'm committing to you that I will always work with the Office of Management and Budget in looking at all benefits that are on the table and trying to articulate what are the benefits not only to the nation, but what are the benefits that are allowable under the law. So your point's well taken.
If Congress required the incorporation of the 6009 benefits in the Corps' formula, which again would make this particular project's cost-benefit ratio more than 5 to 1, would this increase the likelihood of a project like this finally getting underway, and would it be that way for all projects?
If in further discussion with the administration, and I'm committing to you that I will have this conversation with the administration relative to 6009 benefits. I'm seeing it on a number of other ports. I think the time is taken for me to get down and talk to them about this as to what are the total benefits to the nation under the law. And the law specifies Section 6009. So I have an obligation to talk to them about that and get back to you.
Okay, thank you. And just real quickly, with my remaining time, I want to ask a question on behalf of my Texas colleague to the south, Blake Farenthold, in the port of Corpus Christi, which he represents. As you may know, because of uncertainty about federal funding, the port is trying to get a public-private partnership agreed to so they can get to work with their own money, if necessary, on their Corpus Christi Ship Channel Improvement Project. And it's my understanding that a draft of the PPA has been all but finalized since March of 2017. However, the transmittal of that PPA to the core Galveston District has not occurred, thus further delaying construction of this project. Can you explain to me why there's been such a delay in the finalization and transmittal of the PPA to the Galveston District? And if there's any outstanding issues, when do you expect them to be resolved?
Yes, sir. On the Corpus Christi project, I'm working with the senior leadership of the Corps of Engineers to make sure that we can look at the draft project partnership agreement and discuss fully what are the implications relative to pipeline relocations and the costing thereof.
Okay. After receipt of these questions, would you provide me and Mr. Farenthold's office with a firm timeline when Galveston District will receive this PPA?
Congressman, the other thing, though, is that we see a lot of potential in certain P3s. We do believe, though, there's got to be policy on this. And while we have a couple of these that have got a massive amount of growth or capability, it is important that there's some policy developed. And right now we've gotten, I think, a little bit of a hold on future P3s until we're able to shape that policy, mainly guidance we got through the administration and from some of the committees to be able to make sure we can put some of that policy in place. So we are still working through that. We've done a pilot, but we do owe you some more work on what a P3 should look like.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to let members know we're going to go ahead and do a second round for folks that are interested in doing that, but we're going to go ahead and go to the gentlewoman from Michigan, Ms. Lawrence.
Thank you so much, and thank the panel for being here. Mr. Lamont, as you know, the Corps and the EPA both highlighted the importance of the 2015 Clean Water Rule to our health, our communities, and our economies. For the record, I represent a section of Michigan. I'm extremely sensitive to the issue of health when it comes to our drinking water. According to a fact sheet from the Corps and the EPA, about 117 million Americans, or 1 in 3 in this country, get drinking water from small streams that need protection from pollution under the 2015 Clean Water Rule that the Trump administration has proposed to repeal. In June 2017, economic analysis of the Clean Water repeal, did the Corps and the EPA specifically look at the economic benefits of the rule in providing safe and reliable sources of drinking water for 1 in 3 Americans?
Yes, ma'am. Your comment there echoes a number of comments very similar across the nation. Army Civil Works and the Corps of Engineers is working with EPA on this presidential directive to relook at Waters of the United States rule and the road forward. What we've done so far is we've had a number of consultation meetings with concerned stakeholders, representatives of tribes, representatives of states, yes, representatives of local municipalities. We are hearing your concerns loud and clear. The road forward is going to be a difficult one, in my perspective, as to, not only documenting the economics and the environmental concerns, and you have our assurance that we're going to do our due diligence to examine all these aspects and listen to constituents and stakeholders as we move forward on this.
I want to say to this panel, and while I have this mic, that when it comes to safe drinking water in America, it is not a partisan issue. It is not an administration issue. It's a matter of quality of life. We as human beings cannot exist without water, and we must ensure that we are funded and that we are protecting our water from pollution. And there is no, to me, gray area in that, and this is not about how you can shape it in a political agenda, and I'm very passionate about that. Also, while I have the mic, SULOX, as you know, is Michigan. I'm sure the Lieutenant General Semonite, I understand that you recently visited the SULOX complex, as I did in a Michigan delegation. What are you doing to ensure that the Corps is taking input from all stakeholders? And can you just give me an update on the reality of your draft of economic reevaluation report of the SULOX project? Thank you.
Yes, Congresswoman, and we need about 7 more months to finish that draft. We'd like to get it done by January. We do have a shortage of funds right now. We're working to reprogram to figure out how to get more money so we can make sure we get that done by the 7th month. I was at the SULOX. It's absolutely critical to the nation, and this is where I had said earlier, but this is one particular lock called the Poe lock where 100% of iron ore comes through that particular lock. If that lock goes down for any type of a period, there'll be dramatic ramifications back to the economy and back to unemployment in that region. And the Homeland Defense report is very, very clear as to how critical that is. So we are putting a lot of effort to be able to make sure that that report is done right. But it might need where the committee and Congress would have to help, because if it's just a benefit-cost ratio decision, then it's just going to be like any other project. SULOX can't be. SULOX is in a different category.
It is.
Because it is a one-of-a-kind lock for a one-of-a-kind commodity.
And please, I would like to get a report from you. And when you say we need more money, what does that mean? Where is it coming from? And where can we use our support for that? Because I'm uniquely and passionately aware of what you've said, and we must work together.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Lamont's working this. This is an internal thing with what's called with the work plan, how we put the work plan in the last couple hours of when the submission was. So we've got to go back in and find the right place where we have some funds that are actually not going to be obligated this year, and we can redivert them, but we've got to go through the right process to make that happen. I want to get this done in like the next week or week and a half. Mr. Lamont's all over that.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. We're going to go to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Boss, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here. First off, Mr. Lamont, I want to get one thing out of the way real quick, and then I've got a longer discussion we need to have. Program funds that are being requested by St. Louis Corps to do repair on East St. Louis levee projects. The district is making that request real soon. I'm doing a follow-up letter to you. You'll be receiving, and if you just could respond to that when you get it. I'm just giving you a heads up, it's coming your way.
Absolutely, sir. We'll look right into it.
And now what I really want to deal with is, so back in December of 2015, we in my district and on both sides of the river had the wonderful opportunity to have what was known as the holiday flood. It wasn't a holiday for any of your employees, and it sure wasn't a holiday for us. We were fighting floods in the middle or late December, early January. During that time, a levee called the Lynn Small levee, which was a non-federal levee that was created by Governor Lynn Small years ago. It became part of the system. We have done maintenance on it over the years. Always, it has never burst on the high pressure side. At that time, it did burst on the high pressure side. And if you will look at a map of Illinois, I've actually given this speech on the House floor, and I want you to, in your mind, remember how Illinois is shaped. It comes down and it does a curve, a very, very sharp curve that's 17 miles around. That is called what's known as the Dogtooth Bend. It's a 17-mile area around on the Mississippi, very much used for navigation. When that Lynn Small levee blew, it started cutting across the 3 miles that is across. Now, the unfortunate issue is that is about a 12-foot drop in elevation. So over a 17-mile, it doesn't bother navigation. If it ever makes the cut through, we're going to have a navigational problem, and all traffic will be stopped from New Orleans to the Great Lakes. This is something I've tried to explain to the Corps, and I worked with the St. Louis Corps getting the language right, because the Corps has, you know, I understand you're spending millions of dollars right now in maintaining navigation, but unfortunately when it comes to a levee like that, we won't repair it because you have to have a cost-effective, it's calculated only on flood prevention, okay? That's the only calculation you can use. We actually put in the word bill language that we discussed with the St. Louis Corps on how it would actually allow them the opportunity to come back and do the repairs necessary to keep that from cutting through and stopping navigation along the Mississippi River. This is a nationwide problem if this occurs. Somehow, someone went in the Senate, whenever we passed the bill over to the Senate from the Corps, and requested that the language be moved out. So we're still stuck in a situation where we're not able to do the repair. Today, that's not a problem. It's a little frustrating because the floods keep coming right back in. We got some riprap there blocking it. But I want to know what we can do with the Corps to get this problem cured before we have a nation trying to figure out. I mean, remember, I came from the trucking industry, and the trucking industry will be very, very happy if all of a sudden it's blocked there. They can actually start unloading the barges at one spot, haul it upriver, and do that. But I think we probably want to make sure the navigation continues. So what can I do with you to work to make sure we get this problem fixed?
So, Congressman, there's not a good, clean answer right now. We know you need about $16 million. We've looked at it very closely. Tony Mitchell, our colonel out there, personally
does a great job.
We were able to justify the bank repairs. That's the only thing the current rules allow us to do. We do want to work with you very closely to figure out if there's some other way. As we look at the rules right now, we don't feel that we are justified to be able to spend the $16 million over what's called PL 8499, because it does need a benefit-cost ratio of 2.5. So I hate to say no, but right now the current rules we have don't allow us to do this. My guys met with you last week. We want to continue to figure out, are there some options out there?
But here's the problem. We had the language. We sent it to the Senate. I don't know who, but someone said, okay, we don't think this is a good idea. And you pulled it out, and I was not contacted when that took place. My staff was not contacted. We found it out after the fact, after we had already made a commitment to our locals that we did our job, which is putting the wording in correctly to try to cure this problem. Yeah. You know what? The locals would love to see the levee back. That's no problem. And I understand their frustration of watching the family farms be destroyed by 7 foot of sand being piled up along 10,000 acres of farmland. But the real concern I do have is that navigation. And if we need to do something quickly, I thought we had the problem cured. Don't know what happened in the Senate. There's a lot of things that happen in the Senate. I don't know what happens in the Senate. And in the short period of time I've been here, I became very frustrated with them, but we all are. But we've got to get this fixed.
So, sir, we're committed to working with you on this one. We don't know what happened as well either. On the other hand, you've got a gap in there, so there are some, areas that could very easily be flooded again. So let's continue to figure out what options. Well, the Congress does a great job of laying out what our authorities are. We are committed to be able to work those authorities as best we can within those boundaries. But this one right now, we don't feel we have the flexibility to apply that money to that particular hole in that levee.
Okay, let me explain this. The riprap that was put in place is just above, slightly above flood stage. So the spring floods, I went down there again, and the river was coming over just as fast and just as hard and cutting more. So we're limited on the amount of time we have before it cuts all the way through. And I think it's something that needs to be brought to a level where I brought it up to my leadership, Senate leadership needs to know it, and I think the administration needs to know and understand. When a problem is this big, it's one thing if I'm fighting for my district, but I'm fighting for keeping a major transportation thoroughfare open for the economy and for just everything that is in this nation. When we start taking out the center of the nation, ability to move products up and down that river, it's huge.
And so we know you're prepared to permit legislation to do that. Our guys are willing to help draft that legislation, and then we'll see what comes back out from that, and we'll work within those authorities.
Okay, thank you.
Congressman, can I add one thing?
Please, briefly, we need to move on.
Colonel Tony Mitchell is now our executive officer in my office, thanks to General.
He knows the situation well.
I will specifically talk with him about this issue also.
Thank you,
sir.
Thank you for giving me the extra time.
Thank you. We're going to go to the best dressed member of the committee, the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Wilson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Graves, for holding such an important hearing. And I want to thank our esteemed witnesses for sharing their perspectives on the implementation of WRDA 2014 and WRDA 2016. Chairman Schuster should also be commended for his commitment to develop and passing water resource development legislation every 2 years. Passing this legislation has truly been a bipartisan effort. As co-chair and founder of the Florida Ports Caucus, I worked shoulder to shoulder with my Republican colleagues to build bipartisan support for WRDA 2014 and WRDA 2016. The impact on Florida alone has been tremendous. This legislation has helped Florida become a premier maritime location for freight and cruise and has provided much-needed resources to repair and restore the Everglades, which is a state and national treasure. WRDA legislation also has had a significant economic impact on Florida's 15 seaports, which, based on a recent 2016 study, provide nearly 900,000 jobs. Port Miami was one of the more recent harbor deepening projects just completed by the Corps. That port is now able to receive post-Panamax vessels with 50 feet drafts that travel to Miami through the Panama and Suez canals. 2 other seaports on Florida's East Coast will soon join them. The 2017 Corps of Engineers budget includes funding for construction on a deepening project of Port Jacksonville and engineering and planning for the Port Everglades deepening project. I look forward to working with each of you to ensure that these projects are funded and in future years and stay on track. I have a couple of questions. The General Society of Civil Engineers estimates that our nation's ports and harbors will need an additional investment of $15.8 billion between now and 2020 to meet the demands of larger and heavier ships that will use the Panama Canal. This increased investment would protect $270 billion in U.S. exports, $697 billion in GDP, and 738,000 jobs annually. Given this increase in demands that will put on our waterborne infrastructure in the coming years, can you say with confidence that the Corps will be able to meet these needs in the current physical environment? General.
Ma'am, we're committed to be able to continue to make sure that Congress understands the value of harbor deepenings because it is a direct input back to our economy. We have done a lot of these. You mentioned a couple in Florida. We are continuing to work East Coast ones. We're working ones in the Gulf right now. I can't commit to what's going to happen, anything past FY18 based on the funds that are out there, but the money that Congress gives us to do harbor deepenings, we're committed to be able to make sure that that money is able to directly go back into the economy and it goes back to jobs and taking care of the nation.
Okay. Section 2106 of WRRDA of 2014 authorizes a new program to provide funds to donor and energy transfer ports. Section 1110 of WRRDA of 2016 amends 2106 and includes revisions to the provision that enables payments to shippers or importers. Can you advise when the department will provide the implementation guidelines on Section 1110? And this is specifically for Port Miami.
We came prepared to talk all these because we're in great detail. Chairman Gray's been very aggressive on asking us to get implementation done. If we can't find you an answer in about a minute, we'll come and we'll walk you through exactly where we're at on that particular section. Ed, do you have that section? So, ma'am, we'll come over and lay this out for you, okay, on that particular one. We need to get this guidance done. Our guys are cranking as fast as they can to work through it, but we want to do it right so that we can make sure that we don't have problems down the road.
We'll be looking forward to that guidance. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. We're going to go to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Weber, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Semonite, you came to my office, and I sure appreciated that. And glad to hear Representative Garamendi commending you for your preparation here, because I'm going to put you to the test. You and I both have been made aware of inaccuracies in the Sabine-Neches Waterway, BCR, over in my area. You know that MARAD has ships there. I don't remember how many ships there are, but I think it's, is it one of 3 of the original anchorages left there, MARAD and Beaumont. 60% of the nation's jet fuel is produced there in our district. Almost 20% of the nation's gasoline east of the Rockies, 60% of the nation's strategic petroleum reserve in this district. In your discussion with Michigan Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence, you talked about, was it the Sioux locks and what would happen because of the iron ore deficiency to our nation? Well, I would argue that Sabine-Neches Waterway is so very valuable and important. If we don't get it dredged out, we're going to tie up those naval ships in there. We're going to tie up a lot of traffic. We could ostensibly tie up the nation's energy supply in a lot of different directions. We know that there's inaccuracies in the BCR. Will you check, I don't know if you have that information in front of you, but would you check on the status of this with the Deep Draft Center of Excellence with Colonel Owen and Colonel Zetterstrom of the Galveston District? Put your finger on those inaccuracies.
Sir, I'm going to go to General Jackson in a minute, but we will definitely do that. The Deep Draft Navigation Center does exactly that. We want to make sure that those BCRs are calculated appropriately so we can stand behind those numbers. Hey, can you
Well, let me break in before General Jackson does that, if I can. So in your discussion with Brenda Lawrence of Michigan, you talked about the deficiency of iron ore. Do you use a national security calculation in this? Because if we lose our fuel capability, if we lose the ability to get naval ships out quickly, and here's a shock, there's enemies in the world that hate us. So how do you include that in your BCR? How can we be sure that Sabine-Neches Waterway is included in the President's F-19 construction budget?
So I'll defer to Mr. Lamont, but I will tell you that the current analysis is based on certain types of calculations. My personal assessment are there are some variables that don't come into that. A good example is exactly what you're talking about, is defense and some of those kind of things. So, Mr. Lamont, I don't know if you want to talk in more detail, but there are some projects that might need the chairman and Congress to be able to look at, do they have some additional type of criteria that should be justified?
Okay, you wanted to go to Major General Jackson.
I'm going to go to Mr.
You're going to go here first. Okay, Mr. Lamont, you're up.
Sir, this will be pretty quick. For Sabine, there's $557,000 in the FY17 work plan to initiate PED. Getting back to General Semonite's point about employing the Deep Draft Harbor Navigation Center of Expertise, that's going to be critical to developing the economics that would allow this project to compete for New Start construction. And unfortunately, Congresswoman Frankel was not very happy with my answer there before, but it is consistent that we have to see a benefit cost ratio ultimately of 2.5 to 1 at a 7% discount rate to qualify for New Start construction. However, there are other factors that need to be brought in.
Well, and so who do we need to bring into that? When you say other factors, that actually was my next question. And we're glad that the FY70 work plan for PET is in there, but we're still working with the Sabine Neches Navigation District, OMB, and all to ensure that the CIP is eligible to compete for President's budgets in FY19. Who else do we need to bring into this conversation with us?
It's incumbent upon us, sir, Army Civil Works and the Corps of Engineers, to work our due diligence relative to examining the full benefits to the nation of not only that port, but all ports through our feasibility report process, and making sure that we're accounting for all benefits across the table. That's the challenge that we have.
Well, let me break in here. So if there Mr. Boss described something on the Mississippi River that would be a problem and would block traffic. Ms. Lawrence you talked about the was it SOU, S-I-O-U-X locks? S-O-O. So obviously if there was a problem there, priorities would change. Who makes that decision? The locks close up and you can't get iron ore. In general, by your own admission, that's a really big problem. Who makes that decision to change that priority?
So where I was going, sir, is that basically some of those priorities have to be, I would recommend to be incorporated into that guidance. They are not currently in there. So those projects are based on an economic benefit-cost ratio, not necessarily a national defense criteria.
So if that kind of calamity occurred, somebody has the wherewithal to say, look, we have got to jump on that and fix that problem. Who is that person?
Sir, our principles and guidelines, which is the framework under which we do our planning and formulation of projects to seek authorization.
But I'm not talking about planning. You don't plan for disaster.
I'm going to try to answer your question directly. We have full latitude, and there's broadness in there to look at all benefit categories, including national defense. So each individual project has its own unique aspects, and we should look not only on the economics,
Mr. Chairman, if you'll indulge me, I get that, but what I'm saying is when that locks up, pardon the pun, somebody says the Corps is going to go in there and fix that. Who is that says that?
I think Chairman Graves has asked us to be able to give him some smart recommendations how to change some of those rules. Right now, there's not a clean answer to that solution if, in fact, the rules don't allow us to work in an area that's not justified. But I think that this is an area where we want to continue to work with the committees to build some of that in. So if there is a crisis, sir, we have the tools to be able to do that. Some areas we do have that for very, very unique type disaster areas. But if there's something that's related back to a very specific requirement right now, I'm not sure we have the flexibility we need to be able to go in and solve one of those problems.
So the nation just loses its iron ore capability.
Sir, I don't want to go there. I'm just saying I think that there could be some more parameters we have to give the Corps more flexibility. And I'm just not smart enough to answer exactly where we want to go.
Mr. Lamont, you've been handed a note by the Brain Trust behind you. Is that salient to this discussion?
Yes, sir.
She handed you a note. Does that describe who is responsible, would make that call?
Well, it's an effort between the Corps of Engineers and my office to make sure that we come not only to the administration but to the Congress with our best possible recommendations.
Okay, thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Sir, I'm willing to work with you on anything in that arena. Sir.
And that's a good point. Please, let's make plans for you to come to my office.
Sir. Thank you.
And I have a letter for both of y'all before y'all get away.
I understand your concern, sir.
Thank you. We're going to go to the other Texas delegation member, the gentlewoman, Ms. Hetty Bernstein Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me thank the witnesses for being here. I'm from North Texas with my district being in Dallas. We are inland, and yet we're probably the #1 trade city in the nation. Therefore, we have an inland port. But with all the growth we have a lot of man-made lakes for drinking water. Joe Pool, Ray Hubbard, Raff Hall in the making. Then we have the Louisville Lake in the area that will probably impact my district more than anybody else's if it floods. The Trinity River and the Brazos. But we remain concerned about the supply of drinking water because we are very heavily populated. In general, in an article that was published in March of this year, you were quoted as saying that another big question we're really trying to look at are the ramifications of the budget cuts on other agencies that we're trying to work with. If EPA gets cut 25% in their budget, and we need EPA to look at a permit, but we can't get it to the right people, that is going to slow our work down. Now, we have some projects that we are heavily dependent on EPA to work with you now in that area. Can you elaborate on this point for the subcommittee and state if you believe insufficient funding at EPA may inadvertently affect the pace of the completion of these core projects?
Yes, ma'am. Good question. Again, back in March or April, we weren't exactly sure what the other agencies were going to get with respect to their budget. There was some dramatic cuts. Some of those other agencies were proposed to have been cut up to 31%. We work very, very collaboratively with those interagencies. So if there's an issue out there and Fish and Wildlife has to give an opinion or EPA, we want to make sure that we are given a federal solution back to this, not just a Corps of Engineer recommendation. So there could be scenarios where if, in fact, an interagency gets reduced in the amount of people they have, that a permit might take longer, a decision, a biological opinion, and I think it's incumbent for us to be able to then figure out how do we prioritize those to keep the most important ones going. We aren't trying to say that we need to put more money back out there to be able to grow all these organizations, but there will be ramifications if the right amount of manning is not in some of these other organizations.
Thank you. Now, there are several ongoing core construction projects that were initiated under the New Starts or provided ongoing construction funding in the fiscal year 2017 work plan. However, for the majority of these projects, additional construction funds are required in fiscal 2018 and beyond to complete this construction. Yet for a significant number of these projects, no construction funding was identified in the President's 2018 budget request. As you know, inefficient funding of construction projects can cause a delay in the realization of benefits of these projects, where we are, in many places, depending on stopping of flooding or providing for drinking water. What is your plan to try to complete projects that obviously are necessary if they've already been identified?
Ma'am, I'm going to give you my personal opinion here. Once Congress makes a decision to start a project, I personally think we ought to see that project through. There are projects where we don't see a continued amount of funding stream to be able to finish some of those that have been started. The best thing we can do is to continue to be able to justify those, so when the committee makes decisions on money, whether it's or the administration in the budget or the committee in the work plan, then we're able to go back and try to keep the momentum going on those. Because it goes back to the longer you take to build something, the more expensive it gets. That's just the laws of human nature. And Mr. Lamont, you want to jump in?
Yes, ma'am. I want to also add that it is clear that as these things are drug out, they are going to get more expensive. Unfortunately, as a result of the tight competition for these funds, it makes things difficult when you're authorizing projects. They're added to the backlog, and they can't get to construction. That's why I think you're seeing a lot of project sponsors willing to use some of the tools that this authorization committee has provided, which is to allow sponsors to start the work, fund the work themselves, and then hopefully have the federal government catch up. In fact, what we're seeing in a lot of cases, this is very obvious. We're having to go back and look at the economics to see if it can compete for New Start funding or continuation of funding, and that gets to be very difficult because you get in kind of a tug back and forth here. You've already completed a chief's report, the project authorized. Will it compete for New Start construction? It may. It may be funded by a work plan. Can it be continued in the budget? It may not compete because of the benefit cost ratio. There needs to be a concerted effort at looking at how I think this nation is going to move forward relative to authorization of projects, construction, and the consequences of delaying these things, and maybe the tools that are available to other entities such as public partnerships to keep things rolling. This is a very valid question that we've heard not only at this committee, we've heard it through the Appropriations Committee staff also. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, and my time has expired, but let me express my appreciation for the work of the Corps, the responsibility that you take, and the great responsibility ahead of you. Thank you.
Wanted to check with you all. I know we talked about taking a brief break. I believe Mr. Webster has one more question left. I've got a number of questions. How are y'all doing? Any urgent matters to attend to? You okay now? Or do it? Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and do my questions, and then we'll go to Mr. Webster and see if there are others. Sections 1144 and 1322 of the WIN Act, in addition to Section 1011 of WRDA 2014, all give different prioritization criteria for budgeting projects. And I really want to highlight 1144, Section 1144 of the WIN Act of WRDA 2016. The legislation says that any project that is within a presidentially declared disaster area, a project where there's a partnership agreement signed, and that the area is a significant risk for flooding, that it's to be prioritized in budgeting. Unfortunately, you have not done implementation guidance. We have the COMET project. General, you and I have discussed this at length. In fact, General Jackson, I believe we've discussed this as well. This project was in the area where we had an extraordinary flood in August. We've had some homes that have flooded, as I recall, I think a total of 3 times since then. This project is not going to be the silver bullet, but it, together with other proposals that have been put out there, including things considered by the Corps of Engineers, such as the Darlington Reservoir and projects that could divert additional water off the Amite River, will provide substantial relief. I want to understand how these laws are being implemented to advise your budgeting decisions whenever there's not even implementation guidance. How are you factoring these sorts of provisions into your overall budgeting decisions? What do I tell these people at home?
Mr. Chairman, I would say in the case of the Comate River, I understand exactly what your concerns are and your frustration. We have $6.7 million in the FY17 work plan. The concern there relative to loss of life really troubles me as far as the ability to look at this hard for FY18 possible work plan money. It gets back to the same issue that there's a common theme here. How do things...
And reallocation of 17 funds.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm bringing home from this hearing a very loud concern from the committee about a possible disparity on how we authorize projects versus how they compete. I want to look into this further and have discussions with our senior leadership, also with the administration. But when it comes to tight funding, what are the mechanisms to allow projects to either complete if they're started or to compete for continued funding? And I understand your frustration there, sir.
Another WRDA 2016 provision, Section 1163. This dates back to either 2008 or 2009, where work related to the hurricane protection system in the greater New Orleans area was going to require mitigation. At one point, the estimates were the mitigation was going to be in the $600 to $700 million range. As a result of candidly, a different application of mitigation for the Corps as compared to the public, that number, I think, got whittled down to about $250 million. Regardless, myself, the governor of Louisiana, and many others advocated that the Corps had $250 million in hand. That was the largest amount of money that y'all have ever had to do wetlands restoration in Louisiana, and you're all familiar with the fact that we've lost 1,900 square miles of our coastal wetlands. Rather than taking those dollars and advancing any one of perhaps $20 billion in coastal restoration projects, many of which have been authorized by this committee, authorized by this Congress, the Corps instead decided to go out and go do some smaller rifle shot projects that will not have the same cumulative environmental benefit than if some of these projects had been advanced. There was a very thorough process that the state went through to put their master plan together. In many cases, the Corps of Engineers was working with them to identify priority projects. I'll say it again, the Congress has identified projects that were authorized through the LCA. Section 1163 was designed to give the Corps some flexibility. Although I didn't agree with the Corps' reason initially for not spending the money on these larger restoration projects, the Corps identified what they believed were obstacles in the law. 1163 was designed to provide some flexibility or relief. Congressman Scalise, Senator Kennedy, Senator Cassidy from Louisiana have all weighed in with the Corps on this and asked specifically for the NOV project in Plaquemines Parish, and the parish president from Plaquemines have asked that the Corps instead look at project investments, wetlands restoration investments that are truly complementary to resiliency in South Louisiana, ecological production in South Louisiana, and I understand that that discretion is not being exercised. I just want to ask you, certainly if you're familiar with it, I'd love to hear your feedback. If not, I want to ask if you could please consult with Colonel Clancy, with General Weir, and see if we can find a more reasonable use of these dollars. Let me say it again. Between the NOV dollars and these other funds, $250 million. I mean, you can do real restoration. We tried to give you flexibility. You may be familiar, General, we've talked about the environmental bank provision that we included in the WRDA 2016 bill as well, designed to give you flexibility to make some of these investments where you can get greater environmental good, greater resiliency for the ecosystem and for the communities. And I see the Corps passing up these opportunities. Listening to the members of this body, this committee, sitting here talking about lack of funding from the Corps, you reading between the lines, you're saying that you've got funding challenges as well. I get it. And then you have opportunities like this to use funds and actually advance your mission, and you're striking out. And so I want to urge you to go back and look at this. Here is an opportunity we're giving you to do what would be done in the private sector, to do what would be done if you want to have greater environmental good here. And again, I think the Corps is missing the opportunity. So I want to ask you to go back and look at that if you could.
Mr.
Yes,
Chairman, I'll take that up, and I'll get with General Weir this week and sort of figure out where the state of play is. I know we're working hard on the implementation guidance, but I want to make sure that I don't miss anything in the discussion. Right. And then I'd like to sit down with you and just make sure I get your perspective so we can move this forward and take advantage of the opportunities Congress intended. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anytime. I'm happy to meet and talk about this at length. Thank you. I'm going to go to a gentleman from Florida, Mr. Webster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the 2014 WRDA bill, there was a provision dealing with resilient construction, which I had a big interest in then, and it directed the use of durable and sustainable materials and resilient construction to be techniques to be used. Unfortunately, the previous administration decided that sustainability was going to be injected, and so in March of 2016, they did some guidance documents, which, in my opinion, facilitated the use of two of the three pigs building materials and left out the one that actually withstood the windstorm that came. Hay is certainly renewable, but I don't know that it would be a part of sustainable, of resilient construction. Same with sticks. But the brick, which is not renewable, would be left out. And my point is there any way that could be reversed or changed, or is there anything you're thinking about that would bring about to ensure that we don't sacrifice resiliency for something else that is less desirable in that kind of construction?
Sir, I'll take this one. You and I spoke about this a year or so ago when we were working through the implementation guidance for this. And so let me circle back with my staff and make sure I understand sort of where the state of play is, what options we have to relook anything, and then I'll get with your staff and try to figure out how we can address the concerns that you just brought up.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to round two, or I guess round two for me. Another question I have is related to the Mid-Barataria sediment diversion project in Louisiana. You may be familiar, this project is very similar to a project that was authorized in the Water Resource Development Act of 2007, known as the Myrtle Grove Project. It's designed to divert water from the west side of the Mississippi River into Barataria Bay. The state decided, after trying to work for a few years with the Corps, the state decided to move on this project on their own. But I want to be clear that there is a very similar project that's been authorized in law. The state has approximately $800 million to $1 billion in non-federal funds available to them in the bank. We talked earlier about the 408 process in response to Ms. Estes' questions. It's my understanding from the state that we are looking at a 5-year approval process, largely attributed to 408 review and Marine Mammal Protection Act work by NOAA, which I understand you're not NOAA, and we're going to work on that NOAA issue separately. But 5 years, I want to be clear. This is an environmental restoration project. It doesn't provide benefits to navigation or anything else. In fact, I may maybe take that back and argue that this actually is designed and will divert sediment from the Mississippi River, thereby hopefully reducing your O&M budget, Baton Rouge to the Gulf. But it's designed to restore the environment, restore coastal wetlands, restore salinity, halosaline lines. This is designed to be an environmental project. The alternative of no action means additional wetlands loss, additional loss of ecological productivity. And we're looking at a 5-year review process. This is supposed to be Fast 41. Fast 41's 5 years. This is on the dashboard.
So, Chairman Graves, 5 years is unacceptable. You know, we got an application from the state in June of 16. We're working, we published a notice of intent to prepare an EIS in April of 17. Right now, it looks like all the information that we're going to need from the state to be able to continue to be able to work this, we should be done by December of 19. That's still an awful long time. That's 3 years.
Say that last part again. December of 19 is what?
December of 19 is when we think we'll have that required information back in and to be able to complete this.
Back in?
Let me just make sure.
The state is committed to giving us the information that we need to inform their 408 recommendation by the December of 2019. That's the date that the New Orleans District has worked with the state of Louisiana.
So they're waiting on information from the state, right?
They are, yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Look, I just met with the state last week. This is a priority for all of us. I just want to reiterate that 5 years is just an unacceptable timeline in having that kind of money in the bank. Like I said, I know the onus is on us to address the NOAA MMPA issue, and we're going to do that. But I just want to ask you that in regard to 408, 404, Section 10, anything else that you're reviewing, that this be on the front burner. We don't need to get into the debate right now, but I blame some of your predecessors for the land loss in Louisiana, and I'm just asking you to be part of the solution.
Chairman, we'll take this on. Like any different process, if we can crash those schedules, we'll go back and work with the state, figure out what can we do to streamline to be able to get this thing done faster.
Okay. Another fun one, deferred payback. You may remember in 2008, the state of Louisiana and the Corps of Engineers signed a 30-year deferred payback agreement under section, what was that, 103K of 86, something like that. I don't remember which section it was, but it effectively allows the state to pay back the non-federal share for the hurricane protection system work over a 30-year period. When that agreement was signed, the Corps of Engineers estimates were that the HPS was going to be completed, at one point it was 2009, another point it was 2010. I believe when we signed it, it was 2011. Right now, I understand that deadline's actually 2019, and based on what I've seen, I think it could actually slip even a little bit more based on some of the settling and sinkage rates, subsidence rates of some of the levees that are being attempted to be handed over. So what happens under that agreement is that the interest accrues until the project is completed. So what at one point was, as I recall, about a $60 million annual payment. We're now looking at $90 to $100 million a year. I'm not going to say that the state's activities, including mine when I was there, were flawless. But these delays are not attributable largely to the state's actions. Yet they're the ones that are going to be penalized by these much higher costs annually, which is going to potentially, based on what I understand is the state's financial situation, that they may be paying this out of the coastal program. So this is directly taking money out of wetlands restoration projects and hurricane protection projects. I'll make note that that was not the plan initially. This was going to come out of the general fund. But regardless, do you think it's appropriate for the state to have to pay the additional cost as a result of the delays attributable to the Corps?
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I mean, that's a huge issue as I understand it. You and I have talked about this before. My understanding from the staff is that according to the deferred payment agreements, the state of Louisiana can go ahead and pay that at any time. They don't have to wait for the project to be 100% complete. So that's my understanding, but if my understanding is in error, then I want to make sure that I get that.
I asked that question, and if I recall, and certainly don't let me be the expert on this, if I recall, the attorneys told me that actually they were supposed to wait, but I will go back and circle back and make sure I understood that correctly.
Mr. Chairman, let's circle back together so that all of our attorneys see the same thing, and we'll make sure that we move forward on this together to do what's right for the state.
Thank you. IHNC lock project. If I recall, the IHNC lock and the Panama Canal were built sometime around the same time, and they fully renovated the Panama Canal. IHNC lock is in dilapidated condition, and it really is amazing. This goes back to just the frustration, I think, with many members of this committee about the inability to finish projects. One thing that we're concerned about is has to do with the traffic impacts of some of the bridge work. Specifically, the language was included in the law that requires that the Corps of Engineers do a post-construction traffic study, that they are to coordinate with St. Bernard Parish and the Old Araby Neighborhood Association. And full disclosure, this is Congressman Scalise's district. I've been asked to ask these questions. From what I understand from talking with those organizations, they have not been consulted with, and that the traffic study perhaps is being considered after the fact as opposed to informing some of the decisions. Don't need a response because I'm guessing it's a weedy issue, but I just want to ask if you could go back and please review the law, review the obligations of the Corps of Engineers in this case, and again, St. Bernard Parish, Old Araby Neighborhood Association, please do work with them to address concerns, and I think this should be done on the front end versus the back end to inform decision making as opposed to trying to come back and mitigating after the fact. Congressman Lowenthal hit on the section 1122, which is the beneficial use of dredge material. General, once again, I view this as an opportunity for the Corps to expand the available resources of the Corps. Beneficially using that dredge material to advance your ecological restoration projects, and in the case of Louisiana, it's a perfect example. I know there are many other examples around the nation. We're double handling sediment. It doesn't make any sense from a cost effectiveness perspective. I'm concerned that the Corps of Engineers has a big fat wall between their CG program and their O&M program, between their ecological restoration and their navigation maintenance, and I think this is an opportunity for the Corps to see much greater benefit by coordinating activities, not double handling material, talking to states and non-federal sponsors in some cases about paying the incremental cost of perhaps moving that material an extra half mile in some cases, but at the end of the day, it is going to significantly reduce backlog. It's going to advance some of the projects that we have for ecological restoration, and I urge you to please look at opportunities there.
Chairman, I'm in violent agreement with you. There's a lot we've got to continue to do with regional sediment management, and we've seen in some areas we've had great successes. New York Harbor is a good example, but I think throughout the Corps we've got to do a better job. Some of our ports are actually running out of areas to be able to put sediment, so the more that we can figure out how to be able to cut those costs down, it's to everybody's advantage.
I had a number of members, including Mr. DeFazio, talked about the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund and concerns with dredging and certainty for navigation channels. Hearing the President talk about America First, talking about the need for us to advance our economy, increase our global competitiveness, and then watching these nav channels silt up and not be maintained at authorized depths is frustrating. It seems like it's contradictory. And I remember that the previous president established a goal of doubling exports for this nation by what was it, 2015, I believe, and that goal wasn't even close to being met. And I think part of it was the lack of complementary investment in infrastructure, such as ports and waterways. In the case of the Atchafalaya River Bayou Cheyenne Buff and Black project, again, another navigation channel affecting the Port of Morgan City. We have the Houma Navigation Canal in Terrebonne Parish is another one. All of these, at Calcasieu River, all these ports come visit with us and talk about this lack of navigational certainty. Even the Mississippi River has had navigation restrictions. I signed a letter together with Congressman DeFazio asking the President to dedicate the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund and to fully dedicate it and the remaining balance. I think that's what should be done. I think it's going to address this backlog, and I think, quite frankly, it's the honest thing to do in regard to budgeting. But Section 1113 of the WIN Act does allow non-federal interests to carry out dredging activities in cases when the draft is not meeting authorized levels. It's been 8 months since that bill's been signed into law. There's been no implementation guidance last I saw. Could you give me a timeline on when that's going to be done?
So we've got it right here. You said 1118?
Does she have something for me or not? Okay, okay. All right, well, I'll tell you what.
We'll get back with you, sir.
Go ahead and go to the gentleman from California, Mr. LaMalfa, while you're digging around.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier this year in Northern California, we're all aware of the Oroville Dam and the challenges there with a lake that, thankfully was able to fill this year. I love to see full lakes. Okay, so with some issues with it, with the spillway, the main spillway breaking, and then a rapid rise of water that ended up utilizing for the first time in 50 years the emergency spillway system at the lake. And there was great concern since it hadn't been used before, and erosion that happened on a mud hillside instead of a concrete apron area, that there's fear of collapse, a part of that infrastructure, which would have had obviously big effects with at least a 30-foot head of water behind that. So with that uncontrolled flow and with that high amount of flow during that time and a lack of maintenance and some other issues with the levee system farther down the Feather River, reaching through Butte County, Yuba, and Sutter County, several reaches of this levee system require emergency repairs. Indeed, they were having to spend effort and money during February and March to go out there and shore it up just to get through this season, and lost opportunity from the previous year of actually making the permanent repairs that would have been done. Now we have good money going after bad of those repairs not having been done. So they shored that up. So my understanding now, the only thing standing in the way of these repairs is a sign-off from the San Francisco Division of the Corps, and here we are on July 19th, or a problem we knew about in February or March. We've known it actually for years. Can the gentleman from the Corps update me on something, hopefully right now, that shows that they're ready to sign off, or the sign-off has done for that Yuba Sutter area with the Feather River system levee projects that need to be done, and certainly we should be well aware of. Please, Major General Jackson.
Yes, sir. I don't have the specifics to answer the question. I know that the answer is out there. Let me get with South Pacific Division, and let me circle back with you and your staff and give you the answer that you're looking for.
Okay, I appreciate it, because again, they stand at the ready to make this project happen, and it's needed, and people are dependent upon this for the safety of the area. So maybe Mr. Lamont here, on the Sutter Basin project being carried out by the Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency, and a local entity, during the discussion about the Corps work plan for 2017, do you know how the Corps will further involve and increase the use of non-federal resources to decrease the amount of time and money it would take to complete water projects like this, because they stand ready to go, and they can do things very fast, very efficiently, lower cost. Can you tell how what the Corps' plan is to further involve a local agency like Sabufka?
Mr. Congressman, I understand there was a bit of a disparity between the Corps District and the sponsor on the project cost and the ability to move forward. And that got caught up in our time frame on developing not only the FY17 work plan, but also the FY18 budget. And I'm hopeful that that can be resolved as quickly as possible. So, you know, we can look strongly at this one as a contender for FY18 work plan funding.
18, but what about 2017? It's
right.
We're, you know, again, we need the sign off from the San Francisco Corps Division. Can we come back to that? Because we're burning daylight. It's July 19, and right. They need to be doing this. Otherwise, we're subjecting ourselves to another year of risk, another year of winter patch-up jobs to keep boils from happening at the edge of the levees. Can you elaborate any?
And PED, pre-construction engineering and design, was funded in FY17 to continue the process to get it ready for new start construction consideration. So we're not losing any time on that aspect. The time that you're concerned about was, did it get a new start designation, which it did not this year. That's true.
General Jackson, why would that not be? Why wouldn't we be getting that new start?
Sir, that would, I don't know, Mr. Lamont, you're going to have to answer that. I'm not sure
Okay.
why we
All
would
right.
not get a new start. But that it has to compete with all the other
Right.
projects that are out there competing for new start.
My understanding in talking with folks from my office in concert with the Corps is that it just wasn't ready to go. And I will look more clearly into this for you and get you a specific answer as to what the problem was, and to try to resolve this and get this for consideration for the next cycle
Okay.
year.
Well, not ready to go certainly wouldn't reflect any of the local effort for
Yes, sir.
local funding or local ability or input on that. It would merely be federal government dithering what we're talking about here, and that's very, very frustrating. We have some people extremely motivated and concerned in the community. This is an area that had almost 200,000 people evacuate due to the various factors here, whether it was the dam spillway itself or the levee system that is on the edge in some areas, and they're darn tired of it. And so we need answers on that, and I would appreciate them, and I'll yield back as I'm over time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, in wrapping up, I want to say, one, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your endurance today. I want to circle back to what I said at the beginning. The mission you have is absolutely critical to this nation, whether it's facilitating maritime commerce and global trade, it's improving the resiliency of our communities, improving the resiliency of our ecosystem. These are critical missions to the nation. They're fundamental. And the implementation schedules that we've seen are simply unacceptable. The West Shore project in Louisiana was in a study phase for 42 years before the report being finished last year, which I do appreciate, but 42 years. You can never explain, justify those types of schedules to any taxpayer, and we shouldn't ever have to. It's unacceptable. And moving forward, we have an opportunity, I think. I think there's a strong desire on both sides of this committee to change things, to give the tools we need to actually get these projects completed. I think there were a number of tools in the 2014 and 2016 bill, in many cases where the implementation guidance has not been finished. I'm looking, there were sections where the 2014 bill said that within 90 days of enactment, certain things needed to happen, and we still don't even have implementation guidance from those. Other cases, 180 days. We're over 3 years later. In the 2016 bill, again, 90 days, 180 days, 180 days, 180 days, 180 days of enactment. The Secretary shall do X, and these things aren't happening. I'll say what I said before. I don't understand how the Corps can go enforce laws and say, well, you know, to the American taxpayer, you have to comply with this law, yet the Corps itself is ignoring many laws that we write here on this committee. It's one thing that really bothers me personally. I know it bothers a lot of members of this committee, that accountability is not happening, and it's something that we are going to work on to make sure that moving forward, we don't have these continued lapses. It's in our shared interest. I know that Congress has culpability or responsibility to make sure that we're cleaning up laws, providing streamlined processes and appropriate resources to get things done. We need to work together to do these things. We're talking about an infrastructure package moving forward. The Corps' regulatory practices and others are all going to be integral to the success of this. The last thing in the world we need is to have $1 trillion sitting in the bank because we can't spend it because we're stuck on pre-construction activities. And so I want to work together with you all and many other stakeholders in this committee included.
Mr. Chairman?
On putting together a process that recognizes the urgency, is corresponding to the urgency of many of these projects around the nation that we need to build. Mr. Lamont.
I'm sorry, I'd like to point out an irony here. You said a 42-year wait on a project. Tomorrow will be the 48th anniversary of landing on the moon. So we put a man on the moon 48 years ago tomorrow, and we have 42-year lags in doing projects on Earth here. I mean,
and that was a 42-year just to finish the study on a project that we hadn't even gotten the first penny of construction funds on yet. Yeah.
Well, Mr. Chairman, that's unacceptable. We all know that. And I think we're all committed to continue to be able to figure out how to make recommendations of the process so we can streamline this and get back to these answers to the American public. They deserve that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it very much, and as you know, and I mentioned early on, I'm sure we'll have some questions for the record, and I would appreciate your prompt responses to those, in addition to following up on some of the other things where you committed to do so. If no other members have anything else to add, the committee stands adjourned.